Chapter 1286. Heavenless Sword. The void staircase was extremely long. Zhuowen walked up the staircase step by step. He found that there were 16 steels on the staircase, and each steel was engraved with different formations. Every single formation diagram contained profound truths. Although Zhuowen's current level of cultivation was too low to comprehend the formations, he was able to constantly temper his immortal force by copying the formations. Then, he would use the immortal force to feed back his mental strength and origin force, causing the two powers in his body to constantly increase. In front of the 16th steel, Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment, his temperament had changed. He became free and easy, as if he had shed all his splendor. The aura on his body was much stronger than before. You've gained a lot. By comprehending the formations in these steels, your spiritual power has advanced again, reaching level 6 complete. Xiao Hei's slightly surprised voice rang in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen smiled and said, "It's not just my spiritual power. The celestial power fed back from comprehending the formations is extremely rich. My original power has just reached the peak of level 1 Emperor Realm. I'm afraid it won't be long before I can advance to level 2 Emperor Realm." Speaking of this, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with excitement. After a warrior advanced to the Emperor Realm, it was naturally more difficult to break through than before. Of course, advancing to the Emperor Realm was slightly easier than advancing to the Emperor Realm from the peak of Celestial Master Realm. After all, advancing from the Celestial Master to the Emperor Realm was a big leap. Once a warrior crossed the threshold, there would be an unprecedented transformation. Because of Xiao Hei, Zhuowen needed to be well prepared to advance. He had to accumulate enough to have a slight chance of breaking through to the Emperor Realm. This could be seen from the fact that he had used 12 Hearts of Emperor. After crossing the threshold of the Emperor Realm, the next advancement was naturally relatively simple. Of course, this was compared to advancing to the Emperor Realm. If compared to the small realms of the Four Reverends Realm, advancing to the small realms of the Emperor Realm was naturally more difficult. After all, Zhuowen had just advanced to the Emperor Realm. It was extremely fast for his original power to reach the peak of level 1 Emperor Realm in such a short period of time. We're reaching the end. When Zhuowen walked past the 16th stone tablet, he discovered the end of the void staircase. At the other end of the staircase, there was a huge pavilion made of beautiful jade floating in the air. The void pavilion was made of beautiful jade. It was richly carved and magnificent. As Zhuowen stepped into the pavilion, a trace of tranquility appeared in his heart. He felt relaxed and happy. There was a faint fragrance lingering in the pavilion. When the fragrance entered his nose, it refreshed his mind. Zhuowen felt as if his mind had become much clearer under the effect of this fragrance. The pavilion was very quiet, and the furnishings inside were also very monotonous. A shabby praying mat floated in the middle, and behind the praying mat was a stone platform. There were only two things on the stone platform: a long sword covered in cracks, and a plain wooden tablet. At first glance, these two things seemed very unremarkable. However, when Zhuowen took a closer look, he discovered that these two things were extraordinary. Although the long sword covered in cracks looked shabby, it revealed a trace of pressure that made Zhuowen's heart skip a beat. Zhuowen had seen quite a few high-class emperor weapons in the past. However, he was stunned to discover that the pressure from this tattered longsword was actually above that of a high-class emperor weapon. "This is a saint weapon!" Xiao Hei's voice suddenly rang out, causing Zhuowen's entire body to tremble. He stared at the shabby long sword in front of him, his throat trembling and his mouth dry. Zhuowen had indeed seen a saint weapon before. It was the Azure Dragon Hall. However, other than the Azure Dragon Hall, he had not seen any other saint weapons. Now that Xiao Hei said that the shabby long sword in front of him was a saint weapon, Zhuowen could not remain calm. "That's not right. The pressure of this long sword is much weaker than the one in the Azure Dragon Hall. Is this really a saint weapon?" Zhuowen asked with some doubt. Since emperor weapons are divided into different grades, saint weapons are naturally divided into different grades. Emperor weapons are divided into low grade, mid grade and high grade. Saint weapons are also divided into 3 grades: profound saint weapon, heavenly saint weapon and immortal saint weapon. Xiao He explained indifferently. I see. Since saint weapons are divided into 3 grades, does that mean that saints are also divided into different grades? Zhuowen asked curiously again. Saints were legendary existences in the Eastern land. It was said that such figures could move mountains and fill seas with a wave of their hand. They could even open up their own small worlds and use their own saint force to forge a powerful world. The strength of their various divine abilities could be said to be deeply rooted in people's hearts. Because Zhuowen had never come into contact with the saint realm, he naturally did not know much about the division of saints. However, he knew that Xiao He definitely knew. After all, this guy's origin was extraordinary. It was very likely that he came from the mysterious central land. Asking Xiao He was naturally not a problem. It is indeed as you have guessed. Saints are also divided into different grades. Above the Emperor realm is the Pilgrimage realm. In layman's terms, we call Pilgrimage realm cultivators saints. There are 3 major realms in the Pilgrimage realm, which are Profound Saint, Heavenly Saint and Immortal Saint. Furthermore, the reason why saints possess various abilities that martial emperors do not possess is because saints have grasped the law of the divine inscriptions. The so-called law of the divine inscriptions is a law that saints comprehend through the law of the heavens and earth and their supreme saint power. Although the power of the Saint Mark law is much weaker than the laws of heaven and earth, it is, after all, comprehended from the laws of heaven and earth. It also contains a trace of the laws of heaven and earth, which is the so-called heaven's might. It is precisely because of the power of the laws that the strength of saints completely surpasses all Emperor realm cultivators. Xiao He paused at this point, giving Zhuowen time to digest what he had said. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of understanding. He silently digested all the knowledge about the saint realm that Xiao He had told him. He did not know about it before, but with the existence of Xiao He, he understood the specific realm of saints one step ahead of others. Then this long sword in front of us should be the lowest level of saint tool, which is also a profound saint tool. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the broken long sword and muttered in a low voice. You are right. This long sword should have been refined by the master of the Emperor's tomb. Although the master of the Emperor's tomb was only a semi-saint, he also had the identity of an arcane saint master. Even if his martial arts realm had not reached the pilgrimage realm, it should not be difficult for him to refine a profound sage-level saint tool by relying on the power and knowledge of the arcane arts. Xiao He indifferently replied. Zhuowen nodded and said with a slightly hesitant voice, Then the Azure Dragon Palace is of a higher level than this long sword. It should be a heavenly saint tool? You underestimate the Azure Dragon Palace too much. The Azure Dragon Taoist was an influential figure 10,000 years ago. He was a saint, immortal saint. The Fighting Buddha Demon Saint and the Wind Thunder Divine Monarch were also at this level. They were extremely famous geniuses back then. So the Azure Dragon Palace is an immortal saint tool. Xiao He shook his head and said, It is actually so powerful. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a shocked expression. Speaking of which, his luck was really good. Whether it was the Wind Thunder Divine Monarch, the Fighting Buddha Demon Saint, or the Azure Dragon Taoist, they were all saints of the immortal saint realm. They were definitely the peak existences among saints, and he had actually encountered them before. Although he had never seen them in person, he had obtained the things of these 3 saints. The Wind Thunder Divine Monarch's Thunder 3 Wings, the Fighting Buddha Demon Saint's Buddha Demon Eye, and the Azure Dragon Taoist's entire inheritance. This profound saint tool is completely broken. How much power can it still retain? After the excitement, Zhuowen discovered a serious problem. That was, the long sword in front of him was a little damaged. Could it still be used? From the damage of the saint tool, it was not difficult for Zhuowen to imagine how fierce the battle between the owner of the Emperor's tomb and the heavenly insect avatar was. Even the saint tool was broken. That battle was really a little terrifying. Looking at the situation of this saint tool, I'm afraid it is only a little bit away from being damaged. If I'm not wrong, this long sword of the saint tool level can only be used twice at most. After 2 times, I'm afraid it will directly disintegrate. Xiao He said with a little pity. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a touch of disappointment. but immediately returned to normal. With a wave of his right hand, he grasped the long sword in his hand and said softly, "After all, it is a saint tool. If it can be used twice, it will be of great help to me." Holding the long sword, Zhuowen discovered that there were 3 small seal characters carved on the hilt of the sword. He murmured in a low voice, "Heavenless sword. It's named Heavenless sword. Does it mean that it is lawless?" Thinking of this, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a strange look, but it was only fleeting. After storing the Heavenless sword into his spirit ring, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the ordinary wooden tablet on the stone platform. There was a rather profound pattern drawn on the wooden tablet. When Zhuowen stared at the pattern, he frowned slightly. He actually felt as if he had fallen into endless darkness, and his head actually became dizzy. What are the patterns drawn on the wooden tablet? Zhuowen took a few steps back and turned his head away. His heart faintly trembled. The patterns on the wooden tablet were too strange, as if they wanted to devour his consciousness. Damn, it's actually the Saint Rune Law. Suddenly, Xiao Hei's slightly fluctuating voice rang out, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink. He also did not expect that the patterns drawn on the wooden tablet would actually be the Saint Rune Law. When Zhuowen calmed down, he also understood. Although the owner of the Emperor's tomb was only a half-saint, he should have first comprehended the Saint Rune Law and become an invincible Emperor Lord before stepping into the half-saint realm. This also explained why the Saint Rune Law was left behind in the tomb of the owner of the Emperor's tomb. Since it's a Saint Rune Law, why is it that my consciousness is unable to detect it at all? In fact, my consciousness was nearly devoured by it. Zhuowen frowned slightly as he spoke in astonishment. Chapter 1287. By Feng. You can give this Saint Rune Law to your father, Zhuo Xiaotian, for reference. It should be able to speed up his advancement to the invincible Sovereign Lord realm, Xiao Hei said indifferently. Zhuowen nodded, and no longer looked at the runes on the wooden tablet. Instead, he kept it in his spirit ring. Just as Xiao Hei had said, his current cultivation was too low. It was impossible for him to comprehend the Saint Rune Law. Giving it to his father was the most appropriate choice. Moreover, Zhuowen had a feeling that if he could pass the 3rd level of the Azure Dragon Hall, he might be able to obtain the complete inheritance of the Azure Dragon Taoist, as well as the Saint Rune Law. After all, the Azure Dragon Taoist was a celestial saint existence. His Saint Rune Law was definitely very powerful. The moment he put away the wooden tablet, a powerful aura suddenly filled the entire pavilion. Then, Zhuowen was stunned to find that the shabby praying mat floating in the middle of the pavilion was bursting with blazing light. The light then slowly condensed into a hunched figure. It was an old man with a hunched back and a face full of wrinkles. However, his eyes were extremely sharp and emitted a terrifying light. The old man stared at Zhuowen without saying a word. Instead, he stretched out his skinny right hand. Zhuowen was shocked to find that the jade cauldron in his sea of consciousness involuntarily flew out. The river diagram contained within the jade cauldron, and a huge dragon horse stepped out. With a neigh, it appeared in the void while stepping on the yellow river. The complete river diagram, and this jade cauldron? The light in the old man's eyes became even more intense. Then, his gaze moved down and landed on Zhuowen. He smiled and said, "This old man remembers that the river diagram was incomplete. Did you complete the complete river diagram?" Zhuowen was secretly shocked. This old man was so powerful that he could silently summon the river diagram and jade cauldron from his sea of consciousness. It was as if the old man was extremely familiar with the river diagram. After pondering for a moment, Zhuowen nodded and said, "I did complete the river diagram. Senior, are you the master of the Emperor's tomb?" "Master of the Emperor's tomb? Interesting, you can call me that too. This entire tomb was indeed built by this old man. Of course, my name is Bai Feng. You can call me Elder Bai." The old man smiled faintly and revealed his identity. "Elder Bai, the outside world is saying that you have fallen. Perhaps there is a problem with the rumors. You are not dead?" Zhuowen asked tentatively. Elder Bai chuckled and said plainly, "You don't have to test me. I can tell you clearly that this is only a strand of my spirit. I'm already dead. This strand of spirit is only there to guide my successor. Can you tell me what happened in the Monarch region and the Monarch tomb?" Is it related to the heavenly insect avatar? Zhuowen nodded his head when he heard Old Bai speak in such a manner. Immediately, he began to inquire about the matter back then. Oh, you actually know about the heavenly insect? Elder Bai was startled. Soon after, his deep gaze focused on Zhuowen from afar. His eyes revealed a contemplative expression. Clearly, he was extremely surprised that Zhuowen actually knew about the heavenly insect. After all, this thing was not inferior to the eastern lands. It was unlikely that an ordinary person would know about it. Old fellow, Zhuowen knew about the heavenly insect because this dragon lord told him. There's no need to make a fuss. Suddenly, a black light shot out from between Zhuowen's brows and revealed the appearance of Xiaohe. You are the great Nether Saint Dragon? Elder Bai's gaze landed on Xiaohe. He was initially startled, but soon after he seemed to have thought of something. His gaze immediately became extremely interesting. However, his gaze quickly landed on the jade cauldron and muttered to himself in a low voice. That's right. This child possesses this jade cauldron. No wonder you would follow by his side. Elder Bai, you recognize this jade cauldron? Hearing Elder Bai's muttering, Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and suddenly opened his mouth to ask. Elder Bai nodded his head and said, I have indeed heard of this jade cauldron. Back then, I even came out to search for this cauldron after reading some of the stories. However, I was unable to find it. This is because according to the legends, this cauldron was damaged in a great battle 10,000 years ago, after which, it fled into the distant void and disappeared without a trace. Then what kind of cauldron is this? Zhuowen suddenly became nervous and asked in a deep voice. It could be said that the reason why Zhuowen came to the Sky Armor continent was inseparably related to this jade cauldron in his mind. Therefore, he was very curious about the origin of this cauldron. I am not very clear about the exact origin of this cauldron. I only know that this cauldron is called the Fuxi cauldron. There is also an ancient saying regarding this cauldron. Since you have perfected the river diagram, you should also know this ancient saying, right? Elder Bai smiled faintly and said, The river diagram, the Audiobook, and the saints follow. Zhuowen said in a deep voice. The river diagram and the Book of Luo are two powerful formations. Back then, after I found the river diagram and the Book of Luo by accident, I found out about the existence of the Fuxi cauldron. Moreover, these two formations are a part of the Fuxi cauldron. Therefore, I thought of searching for the Fuxi cauldron. Unfortunately, I was unable to find it. Now that I have seen the Fuxi cauldron after my death, I don't know if I am lucky or unlucky. Elder Bai smiled bitterly. Zhuowen revealed a look of understanding. The damaged river diagram was found by Mu Feng in this emperor's tomb. This place of inheritance of Elder Bai was protected by the Book of Luo's formation. It turned out that all of these were inseparable from his jade cauldron. Then, what is the relationship between this Fuxi cauldron and Xiaohe? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Haha. The great Nether Saint Dragon was extremely famous 10,000 years ago. It was said that he was the best friend of the owner of the Fuxi cauldron. Elder Bai shook his head. However, his gaze landed on Xiaohe as he laughed. Xiaohe was silent for a moment. Then she said indifferently, It seems like you know quite a lot. As she spoke, Xiaohe looked at Zhuowen and said, Kid, back then, this dragon lord said that I chose you because of this jade cauldron. Since it chose you, there must be a reason for it. That's why this dragon lord chose to follow you in the end. I know. If it wasn't for you, I probably wouldn't have been able to reach this step. However, what I'm curious about is, who exactly is the owner of the Fuxi cauldron? Zhuowen's gaze landed on Xiaohe. He knew that Xiaohe definitely knew the identity of the owner of the Fuxi cauldron. His name is Fuxi. During that great battle 10,000 years ago, he went missing. Even I don't know where that guy went. Xiaohe shook her head. She was slightly sad as she said this. Seeing Xiaohe like this, he knew that Xiaohe and that Fuxi were probably very close. Perhaps we might find some clues about Fuxi after entering the Central Plains. Zhuowen chuckled. Xiaohe nodded. Her eyes were filled with gratitude. She knew that Zhuowen had decided to help her find Fuxi. Old man, you've said so much nonsense. Why don't you tell me about the Imperial region? Also, it's not that easy to become an arcane saint master. You actually managed to become an arcane saint master in the Sea of Bitterness. Even I find it a bit inconceivable. Old man, you should have quite a few secrets on you, right? Blackie said rather impolitely. Elderby was slightly helpless. He said indifferently, I'm not from the Sea of Misery. I'm from the Central Plains. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect that the owner of the tomb wasn't from the Sea of Misery, but from the Central Plains of the core region of the Heavenly Armor Continent. That's right. Becoming an arcane saint master is even harder than becoming a saint. In the entire 9 Netherworld realm, there are probably less than a handful of people who can become arcane saint masters. It's indeed very unusual for an arcane saint master to appear in the Sea of Misery. Xiaohei nodded. She wasn't too surprised. This elderby was able to recognize her identity as the Great Nether Saint Dragon, and even recognized the Fushi Cauldron. It was clear that this person was extraordinary. There might not be someone like her in the entire Eastern Plains. This also meant that Xiaohei's expression didn't change much after hearing Elderby say that he was from the Central Plains. In the Central Plains, only the Chaos Temple and the 4 great battlefields can nurture arcane saint masters. Which of these 5 forces do you come from? Xiaohei suddenly asked. The Chaos Temple. Elderby said indifferently. So it's the Chaos Temple. Then you're probably the one who brought the sky insect avatar out of the Central Plains? Xiaohei suddenly asked in a deep voice. Zhuowen became vigilant when he heard this. If what Xiaohei said was true, then this elderby should be the main culprit who brought the sky insect avatar to the Sea of Misery. Elderby smiled bitterly and said, You're right. I was indeed the one who brought the sky insect avatar. However, it wasn't intentional. Perhaps because he sensed the vigilance on Zhuowen and Xiaohei's faces, Elderby shrugged and said, I'll tell you about what happened back then. Perhaps you'll understand my difficulties after hearing it. The main body of the sky insect was suppressed by the Chaos Temple and the 4 great battlefields in the Central Plains. I, Bai Fong, am an arcane saint master from the Chaos Temple. At the same time, I'm one of the people in charge of guarding the sky insect seal. Elderby began to slowly narrate everything that happened back then. Just as he said, he was one of the people in charge of guarding the sky insect seal in the Chaos Temple. His main responsibility was to reinforce the sky insect seal. After all, the sky insect was just too powerful. If he didn't reinforce the seal regularly, it might find a loophole. At that time, the consequences would be unimaginable. This kind of reinforcement of the seal required 5 arcane saint masters each time. During the last reinforcement of the seal, the cunning sky insect actually released a weak avatar that possessed Elderby's robes. Oldby was completely unaware of this matter. After strengthening the seal for around 3 months, Oldby finally discovered the sky worm avatar that was attached to his body. However, the thing that caused Oldby to be furious was that the sky worm had used some unknown method to merge with his physical body and merged into his flesh. It was already too late to expel it. At that moment, Elderby realized the severity of the problem. He knew that if he continued to allow the sky insect avatar to remain hidden in his body, there would be a day when he would be replaced by the sky insect avatar. At that time, it would really be terrible. However, at the same time, he didn't dare to tell this to the upper echelons of the Chaos Temple, because the Chaos Temple was extremely cruel when it came to dealing with sky insects. If the upper echelons learned that he had been possessed by a sky insect, he would definitely die. Chapter 1288. Elderby realized that he might be killed if the upper echelons of the Primal Chaos Temple found out about his situation. So he made up his mind to leave the Primal Chaos Temple. Later on, Elderby found an excuse to leave the Primal Chaos Temple. In order to prevent the Primal Chaos Temple from finding him, he left the Middle Earth and came to the remote Eastern Earth. He established the Monarch Domain in the Eastern Earth Sea of Bitterness. You established the Imperial Domain? And the Emperor's Tomb was also created by you. Did you do all of this because of the celestial insect avatar in your body? Xiaohei suddenly asked. Elderby nodded and said in a deep voice, The celestial insect avatar had already fused with my body. If I wasn't an arcane saint master, My sea of consciousness might have been eaten away by the celestial insect. At that time, I would have become its puppet. To stop the celestial insect, I established the entire imperial domain, and even built the emperor's tomb in the imperial domain. My goal was to stop the celestial insect from stealing my consciousness. Elderby nodded. After I left my inheritance in the emperor's tomb, I used a secret technique to separate my sea of consciousness from my body. Although I succeeded, the celestial insect avatar was extremely cunning. It actually escaped after I separated my sea of consciousness from my body. Fortunately, I nurtured many emperors. The moment the celestial insect avatar escaped, they all attacked it. Speaking up to there, the bitterness at the corner of Elderby's mouth became even more intense. Xiao He said coldly, "Looks like you really don't understand the celestial insect at all. It's most proficient in devouring and plundering. You nurtured so many emperors. It's like sending lambs to the tiger's den." Elderby sighed softly. "You're right. Although I'm an arcane saint master of the primal chaos temple, I've never seen the celestial insect's abilities. The emperors of the imperial domain didn't manage to destroy the celestial insect. Instead, they were all devoured by the celestial insect avatar when they least expected it. The celestial insect avatar became extremely powerful, almost comparable to a half-saint. If I was at my peak, it wouldn't have been difficult to seal the celestial insect. Unfortunately, because of the celestial insect, I abandoned my body, and only my sea of consciousness remained. As a result, I fought the celestial insect. In the end, I was no match for the heavenly insect. The spiritual body that carried the sea of consciousness was severely injured by the heavenly insect." Xiao He frowned slightly and asked in surprise, "Since you were no match for the heavenly insect, how did you seal the heavenly insect?" "Sigh. I've already set up a sealing formation in the tomb. However, to activate the sealing formation, I need to sacrifice myself. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I won't use the sealing formation. However, after I discovered the terror of the heavenly insects, I finally decided to activate the sealing formation." Speaking to this point, the bitterness at the corner of Elderby's mouth became even more intense. Zhuan narrowed his eyes and sighed. He had not expected the destruction of the emperor's domain and the emperor's tomb to be related to the heavenly insect. He had not expected the heavenly insect's clone to be brought over from the primal chaos divine temple by the owner of the emperor's tomb, Bai Fang. "Old man, you're really harming yourself and others. Do you know that if the heavenly insect avatar appeared in the Eastern Earth, it would be a disaster for the entire place? Moreover, due to the heavenly insect's terrifying ability to endlessly devour, it will definitely become more and more powerful. Once it has the ability to release the main body of the primal chaos divine temple, the entire heavenly armor continent will truly be in danger." Xiao He's gaze became extremely stern. His voice became extremely cold as well. However, Elderbai's face was filled with bitterness. He knew that his actions back then were inappropriate. If he had known that this would be the outcome, he would have reported this matter to the upper echelons of the primal chaos divine temple. Perhaps there would not have been so much trouble then. Forget it. You only did this because your life was in danger. It's not your fault. Xiao He waved his hand. Suddenly he said sternly, "Old man, the heavenly insect avatar has opened a portion of the seal." Someone opened the seal? Who is so daring? Doesn't he know how terrifying and dangerous the heavenly insect is? Elderbai's expression changed slightly. Zhuan briefly explained the situation in the emperor's tomb. However, Elderbai frowned slightly. He said coldly, "That Mu Feng is really shameless. He actually colluded with the heavenly insect for this old man's inheritance. Even if that guy enters the inheritance land, this old man will not give the inheritance to him. You created such a huge emperor's tomb. You must have a backup plan, right?" Xiao He suddenly asked. Elderbai's gaze flickered. He glanced at Zhuan and said, "I do have a backup plan. However, this young man's talent is indeed not bad. However, his spiritual energy cultivation is too low. It's only at the 6th grade complete realm. I'm afraid that he won't be able to withstand my sea of consciousness." "Oh, old man, you still have your sea of consciousness?" Xiao Hei's eyes suddenly lit up. Elder Bai nodded and said, "The Sea of Consciousness contains this old man's lifetime of cultivation experience and inheritance. Moreover, this old man is an arcane saint master. If he wants to inherit this old man's Sea of Consciousness, he must at least be an arcane heavenly master. You don't have to worry about that. Zhuowen has cultivated the myriad evolution scripture. His spiritual energy is much stronger than ordinary arcane masters of the same level. Although he's only at the 6th grade complete realm right now, in terms of spiritual energy, there's still a gap between him and an arcane heavenly master. But it's probably not too far off." Xiao Hei smiled. Elder Bai looked at Zhuowen with a bit of surprise and asked, "You've actually cultivated the myriad evolution scripture. Looks like you're quite lucky. If that's the case, I can pass my Sea of Consciousness to you. However, the process of passing it on might be a bit painful. If you can't take it, then say it beforehand. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." Hearing that, Zhuowen's eyes shone with excitement. Elder Bai was an arcane saint master. If he could accept the Sea of Consciousness of such an existence, it would bring him endless benefits. This was because the most precious part of an arcane master was their Sea of Consciousness. Not only did the Sea of Consciousness contain powerful spiritual energy, but it also contained the cultivation experiences and records of many arcane masters. If he could obtain the Sea of Consciousness of an arcane saint master, it would be like having an arcane saint master by his side to guide him. There would probably be very little hindrance to breaking through to arcane saint master in the future. Elder Bai pointed with his right hand and immediately, the tattered praying mat beneath him began to emit an extremely blazing light. Afterwards, Zhuowen discovered that a golden sphere had risen from the praying mat. Within the sphere was a golden ocean. This was the Sea of Consciousness of an arcane master. Zhuowen could even feel an extremely terrifying pressure from the sphere. Before this pressure, Zhuowen felt like he was facing an insurmountable mountain. This was the Sea of Consciousness of an arcane saint master. "Zhuowen, calm your mind and accept the Sea of Consciousness. Don't let your mind wander, or you'll fail at the last step," Xiao Hei suddenly warned sternly. Zhuowen hurriedly calmed his mind and relaxed his mind. He silently stared at the slowly approaching sphere. The pressure that belonged to an arcane saint master was right in front of him. Zhuowen's entire body trembled, and his heart trembled. However, he still straightened his back and calmly stared at the sphere. The Sea of Consciousness in front of him was about to belong to him. Why should he be afraid? What he needed to do right now was to completely absorb the Sea of Consciousness into his own Sea of Consciousness. Boom! Finally, the golden sphere began to slowly sink into Zhuowen's forehead. Afterwards, Zhuowen only felt a thunderous sound in his head. It was as if thousands of lightning bolts were surging in his head at this moment. It was extremely terrifying and intense. Zhuowen's Sea of Consciousness was dark gray, as if it was enveloped by dark clouds. It was completely different from Elder Bai's shining golden Sea of Consciousness. This was the difference between a 6th grade Arcana Master and an Arcane Saint Master. When an Arcana Master stepped into the 7th grade, or in other words, Heavenly Arcana Master, their Sea of Consciousness would undergo a transformation. This was the first transformation, and after becoming an Arcane Saint Master, the Sea of Consciousness would undergo a second transformation. This was why Zhuowen's Sea of Consciousness was gray and hazy, while Elder Bai's Sea of Consciousness was still golden despite the erosion of time. At this moment, in the sky above the gray Sea of Consciousness, a golden ball was falling down like the setting sun. The blazing golden light illuminated the gray Sea of Consciousness, making it extremely dazzling. As the golden ball continued to descend, Zhuowen's face turned gloomy as he discovered that his Sea of Consciousness was surging with monstrous waves. His Sea of Consciousness, which was originally calm and tranquil, was now surging and boiling like a restless heart. The entire Sea of Consciousness began to hum and vibrate. Under the influence of this vibration, Zhuowen actually directly spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were a little dim. "Little guy, the process of inheriting the Sea of Consciousness is originally very painful. You just need to endure it, or else it will really be for naught." Elder Bai's ancient voice rang out, causing Zhuowen to seriously nod his head. Soon after, he controlled the enormous mental energy in his body, turning it into many tough threads that covered the surface of his sea of consciousness, suppressing the restlessness of his sea of consciousness. Rumble! The golden sphere finally reached the surface of the gray sea of consciousness. Immediately, the entire sea of consciousness was stirred up by a tsunami. Zhuowen once again spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was incomparably pale. However, his eyes were filled with stubbornness. He firmly controlled his mental energy and suppressed his sea of consciousness. The instant the golden sphere entered the gray sea of consciousness, countless golden lights erupted. Soon after, the golden sphere shattered. Within it, the turbulent golden sea was like 100 rivers flowing into the sea as it converged into the gray sea of consciousness. Pain! The instant the golden sea poured into the gray sea of consciousness, Zhuowen held his head with both of his hands and involuntarily cried out in pain. However, he still forcefully endured this pain and controlled the gray sea of consciousness to accept the golden sea that was pouring in. The golden sea grew more and more. When the golden light merged with the gray sea of consciousness, a strange dark golden color actually began to emerge. Waves of surging mental energy began to rush out from the sea of consciousness. As if it was feeding back, it rose into the sky above the sea of consciousness and entered Zhuowen's Naiwen Palace. Chapter 1289. Fushi Cauldron. At that moment, Zhuowen's mental energy overflowed in all directions. His clothes and hair fluttered in the wind. He slowly opened his eyes, which contained a sharp golden light. At that moment, the mental energy in his body was much more powerful than before. Boom! With a wave of his hand, Zhuowen's spiritual energy surged out, turning into countless spiritual tentacles that spread out in all directions. The entire space seemed to shatter and collapse. It was extremely terrifying. So powerful. Zhuowen stared at his right hand, his heart trembling. At this moment, the spiritual energy in his body was much stronger than before. It was as if the spiritual energy in his entire sea of consciousness had undergone a metamorphosis. I've advanced from the 6th rank to the Heavenly Arcana Master. Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. His heart was filled with joy. He didn't expect that after accepting Baifeng's sea of consciousness, his spiritual energy would advance to the Heavenly Arcana Master level in one fell swoop. Moreover, he discovered that the sea of consciousness contained countless cultivation experiences, allowing him to gain enlightenment on the path of the spiritual energy. He knew that the path from Heavenly Arcana Master to Saint Master was undoubtedly much smoother than the average Arcana Master. This was because he had obtained the sea of consciousness of a Saint Master. What he lacked now was the accumulation of spiritual energy. When his spiritual energy reached a certain level, and combined with powerful immortal force, he would become an Arcana Saint Master. Both Heavenly Arcana Master and Saint Master have 3 minor realms? Zhuowen frowned slightly as he muttered to himself. He had received a lot of information from Elder Baifeng's sea of consciousness, including the specific realms of Heavenly Arcana Master and Saint Master. Arcana Masters from the 1st to the 6th rank also had 3 minor realms, which were Minor Success, Greater Success, and Great Perfection. However, after advancing to the Heavenly Arcana Master level, there were also 3 minor realms, but they were called Minor Heavenly Realm, Middle Heavenly Realm, and Great Heavenly Realm. These 3 minor realms corresponded to the low-level, mid-level, and high-level Great Heavenly Realm. The ranks of Arcana Saint Masters were similar to those of the Pilgrim Realm. They were Profound Saint Master, Heaven Saint Master, and Immortal Saint Master. Among them, Baifeng was a Profound Saint Master. According to Zhuowen's estimation, Mu Feng, who had displayed great strength in the past, should have reached the Heaven Realm, and was extremely close to the Great Heavenly Realm. After all, the strength Mu Feng was very close to the 7th level Great Heavenly Realm. But the Heavenly and Immortal Saint Master. However, the Heavenly and Immortal Saint Masters will require your own effort, and Heavenly and Immortal Saint. At that moment, Elder Bai, who was transformed from a strand of divine telekinesis, became slightly dimmer. It was clear that the inheritance in his sea of consciousness had consumed a lot of his energy. Elder Bai, is there a realm above Saint Master Celestial? Zhuowen bowed respectfully, but a sliver of ambition appeared in his eyes. Was. Mu was but was fine but was Bibian little guy. You're very ambitious. That's a good question. With that, Bai Feng's eyes became blurred. He said faintly, above Arcana Saint Master, there's a realm called Divine Arcana Master. This kind of existence only exists in legends. Even in the Chaotic Temple, there's no such person. There really is an even more powerful Arcana Master above the Arcana Saint Master. Zhuowen's expression changed as he muttered to himself. Xiaohe sneered. Divine Arcana Master is already comparable to Soul Transformation Realm experts. It can even be said that the influence of Divine Arcana Masters is even more terrifying than Soul Transformation Realm cultivators. Since the creation of the Heavenly Armor Continent, although there have been world-shaking godhood experts, there has never been a Divine Arcana Master. Elder Bai bitterly smiled. The Abyss Saint Dragon is right. There has never been a Divine Arcana Master on the Heavenly Armor Continent. Even in our Chaotic Temple, the strongest is only Immortal Saint Master. If I'm above Heavenly Saint Master, the upper echelon of the Chaotic Temple won't kill me even if I'm possessed. Instead, they'll spend a lot of resources to get rid of the insect for me. Unfortunately, I'm only a Profound Saint Master. Although there aren't many Profound Saint Masters in the Chaotic Temple, there are still quite a few of them. The upper echelon of the Chaotic Temple won't spend a lot of resources to get rid of the insect, because the cost of getting rid of it is enough to nurture another Profound Saint Master. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed when he heard this. Profound Saint Masters were arcane Saint Masters after all. They were world-shaking existences in the Eastern lands. But the Primal Chaos Temple that the Bai Feng spoke of didn't seem to be particularly important. Just what kind of existence was the Primal Chaos Temple? Old man, this strand of your soul shouldn't be able to last much longer, right? If you have any other wishes, you can tell this kid, and he'll help you fulfill them. After all, this kid has received your legacy, so he'll have to do something for you. Xiaohe pointed at Zhuowen and snickered. His sneaky smile almost made Zhuowen lose control of his right hand and slap him. Of course, this was only a thought. Zhuowen also looked at Bai Feng. Senior, if you have any wishes, feel free to tell me. Bai Feng was gratified. I'm glad that you're so considerate. If I really have any wishes, I'm most worried about my clan. With that, Bai Feng waved his sleeve, and a strand of information flowed into Zhuowen's mind. He continued, the Central Lands are divided into 99 prefectures, and each prefecture is a small world. My Bai clan is located in the Green Lotus Prefecture, and is quite a powerful clan. However, the main reason why the Bai clan is prosperous is because I joined the Chaotic Temple and received its protection. However, I've been missing for nearly 1,000 years. I'm afraid that the Bai clan has lost the protection of the Chaotic Temple. I wonder how my Bai clan is doing? If you have the heart, you can visit the Bai clan when you enter the Central Lands. If there are any talented juniors in the Bai clan, you can pass on my inheritance and knowledge to them. Zhuowen nodded and said seriously, if I really go to the Central Lands, I'll definitely go to the Green Lotus Prefecture's Bai clan. Senior can rest assured. Seeing that Zhuowen agreed so seriously, Bai Feng was satisfied and said, you have the aura of the 4-kill formation on you. The black turtle in the pool brought you to the training tower, right? Zhuowen nodded. Bai Feng's eyes flickered, and he continued, then you should have learned the immortal energy method. What do you think of immortal energy? Zhuowen pondered for a moment before saying solemnly, celestial force is the product of the combination of mental energy and origin energy. It's a powerful energy that surpasses both mental energy and origin energy. Moreover, celestial force can be used on formations, instantly setting up formations and unleashing powerful formations. It can even erupt like origin energy, allowing it to unleash powerful attacks and defenses. Then you should know that immortal energy is also divided into different levels, Bai Feng said with a smile. Immortal energy is also divided into different levels? I'd like to hear more about it. Zhuowen was startled and asked humbly, Bai Fong nodded and pondered for a moment. As far as I know, immortal energy is divided into 6 levels. They are low grade, medium grade, high grade, peerless grade, holy grade and creation grade. I think the great Nether Saint Dragon knows the reason why immortal energy is divided into different levels. At this point, the Bai Fong suddenly looked at Blackie and said ambiguously, "You're right. This old man is right. There is indeed such a division of immortal power. The specific reason is that immortal power can not only be used to draw the formation, but also to refine immortal pills. Different levels of immortal power can refine immortal pills of different levels. Low-grade immortal pills, middle-grade immortal pills, high-grade immortal pills, and even the top-grade immortal pills of creation," Blackie said lightly. Immortal pills? Zhuan was startled. He had heard of immortal pills before, but this was the first time he had heard of immortal pills. However, he knew that they were called immortal pills because they were refined with immortal energy. There are many recipes for immortal pills in the Fushi Cauldron. You couldn't refine them back then because you didn't have immortal energy, so I didn't tell you about it, Xiao He said calmly. I see, Zhuan nodded. Then his eyes burned with passion. Now that I'm cultivating immortal energy, doesn't that mean I'm qualified to refine immortal pills? You can say that. Fushi is a genius at refining immortal pills. Back then, he inscribed many recipes in the Fushi Cauldron. At the same time, he also inscribed the He-Tu and Luo Shu formations. The owner of the Fushi Cauldron doesn't need to know the technique of refining immortal pills. He only needs to collect the materials, and you can refine the corresponding immortal pills, Xiao He said with a smile. Zhuan nodded. The Jade Cauldron did have this ability back then. However, as his strength increased, he realized that the recipes were too complicated. He had never even heard of the materials recorded in it. Because he couldn't collect the corresponding materials, he gave up on using the Jade Cauldron to refine immortal pills. Now he finally understood. Apart from a few extremely low-grade elixirs, the rest of the elixir recipes were all elixir recipes of the immortal grade. No wonder he had never even heard of the ingredients of the elixir recipes in the recipe. The Fushi Cauldron has completed the He Tuesday. Does that mean that as long as I inscribe the Book of Luo inside, I can completely recover? Zhuan's eyes lit up. Apart from the He-Tu and Luo Shu, there's one more thing missing. That's Cheng Huang. To put it bluntly, it's the artifact spirit of the Fushi Cauldron. The Fushi Cauldron is too damaged, and its artifact spirit is nowhere to be found. There's still a long way to go before we can completely restore the Fushi Cauldron. Xiao He shook her head. We're still missing an artifact spirit? Zhuan frowned. He never thought that restoring the Fushi Cauldron would be so troublesome. Are you saying that the artifact spirit of the Fushi Cauldron is Cheng Huang? Perhaps I know where Cheng Huang is. The Bai Fong's gaze suddenly became strange when it heard the conversation between Zhuan and Xiao He. Chapter 1290. Cheng Huang. I don't know about the Fushi Cauldron's artifact spirit, but I do know about a fellow who calls himself Cheng Huang. Ever since I obtained the river diagram and the Book of Luo, that fellow has been following me, said the Bai Fong as it rubbed its nose. Following you? You mean that fellow is in the tomb, or is he near you? Xiao He's eyes narrowed as she asked excitedly. Meanwhile, Zhuan recalled the illusory voice that had spoken to the divine tortoise. He looked at Xiao He and asked, Xiao He, do you think it's the voice that appeared in the Tower of Trials? Xiao He looked relieved. She said, You're right. Cheng Huang likes to act mysterious. It's very likely that the owner of that voice is him. I actually didn't think of it. However, that fellow and the divine tortoise are both outside the land of inheritance. It won't be too late to look for that fellow after we leave. Zhuan nodded and looked at Xiao He in surprise. It seemed like Xiao He was rather familiar with Cheng Huang. She actually became excited when she heard about Cheng Huang. This was rather rare. Kid, the immortal force method you cultivated in the Tower of Trials is the most basic method. The immortal force you cultivate is at most low grade. However, the 4 kills formation requires at least mid-grade immortal force to form. I'm very curious as to how you managed to form the 4 kills formation. The Bai Fong suddenly asked curiously. Zhuan smiled and took out the immortal stone. He said, Because I have this immortal stone with me. The formation inside is extremely profound. It can fuse with mid-grade immortal force that's even more powerful than low-grade immortal force. So it's an immortal stone. I refined this little thing back in the Imperial region. I didn't expect it to fall into your hands. It seems like a portion of the formation inside the immortal stone is damaged. If it's complete, it should be able to fuse with high-grade immortal force, the Baifeng said with a smile as it toyed with the immortal stone. High-grade immortal force? Senior, I wonder if you can repair the array formation inside the immortal stone. Zhuowen suddenly asked. The Baifeng shook its head and said, I'm just a strand of spirit now. I can't repair the immortal stone. But this immortal stone can store my spirit. Little fellow, this old man was the one who brought that heavenly worm here. Now this old man will repay the karma that I planted back then. Senior, what do you mean? Zhuowen had an ominous feeling in his heart. Originally, this strand of my spiritual sense was useless. However, if you have the celestial stones, this strand of my spiritual sense can be of some use. If you want to seal it, you must rely on my guidance. The Baifeng's eyes were filled with determination as he spoke indifferently. Zhuowen opened his mouth. He could see the determination in Elder Bai's eyes. The Baifeng's last strand of consciousness was already very weak. It could not withstand any disturbances. Otherwise, it could very well vanish into thin air. If Elder Bai followed him to the outside world to seal the heavenly worm, something bad might happen to him. As a result, Zhuowen was rather hesitant. There's no need to hesitate. The sealing formation of the heavenly worm is very complicated. You won't be able to learn it in a short amount of time. Only I can do it myself. You bringing the celestial stones might be the arrangement of the heavens. The Baifeng suddenly smiled. After a moment of silence, Zhuowen suddenly dropped to one knee and said with a deep voice, Teacher. Zhuowen said the two words very deeply. They contained many emotions. Although he had only known the Baifeng for a short time, the latter's sincerity and willingness to face death had deeply moved him. As a result, he called the Baifeng teacher from the bottom of his heart. The Baifeng was stunned. He stared at Zhuowen, and his face became extremely gentle. He actually teared up. Good. Little fellow, you're my first and only disciple. It's my fortune to be able to accept you. Teacher, do we leave right now? Zhuowen raised his head and asked emotionally. The Baifeng shook his head. Zhuowen, there's no need to leave right now. You should have seen the 16 steels on the stairs in the air, right? How do you feel? Zhuowen was surprised. He said with a deep voice, It's very profound. I can't understand it at all. The Baifeng smiled. The 16 steels record my lifetime's work. Every single steel contains a formation. Before we leave, I'll explain the details and patterns of the steels to you in detail. Once I'm done, we can leave. After saying that, Baifeng waved his sleeve. Immediately, the 16 stone tablets that were originally standing on the stairs in the air appeared above the pavilion. Then with Baifeng as the center, they all landed around them and surrounded them. The formations inscribed on the 16 steels are called the war god portraits. Every single steel possesses great power. If you can grasp all the formations on the steels and use them proficiently, you will possess extremely great power. The Baifeng explained the principles and structure of the war god portraits to Zhuowen with a smile. He explained very carefully, but a sliver of sorrow appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. Obviously, he understood the Baifeng's intentions. The reason why he had stayed behind was obviously because this was the Baifeng's first time being a teacher. Of course, it would also be his last time. He wanted to fulfill all his responsibilities as a teacher before leaving. Only then would he generously go out to deal with the insects. Zhuowen listened very seriously and deeply. He had even imprinted the Baifeng's every action into his mind. Out of all the teachers he had met, the Baifeng was the one who explained things the most carefully. He went from simple to complex, covering every aspect. Time passed day by day. A month passed by quietly. Finally, the Baifeng, who was standing on top of the 16 stone tablets, stopped moving. His gaze landed on Zhuowen again as he smiled and said, Zhuowen, do you understand everything? Teacher, can I say that I don't understand anything? Zhuowen suddenly said in a deep voice after a moment of silence. The Baifeng was stunned. He then shook his head and looked outside the pavilion. He said softly, Zhuowen, there's no need to be sad. I'm already dead. This strand of consciousness will disperse at any time. Before it disappears, I can make up for my past mistakes. At this point, the Baifeng turned his head and smiled brightly at Zhuowen. I died a worthy death. At this moment, Xiaohe also came to Zhuowen's side. He sighed. Kid, the old man is right. With only a strand of consciousness left, even an arcane god master won't be able to save you. Zhuowen smiled and said, I know. Teacher, let's go out. The Baifeng took a deep look at Zhuowen. He also smiled and agreed. The body formed by his consciousness entered the immortal stone. War God Butchery collect. After the Baifeng entered the immortal stone, Zhuowen waved his sleeve and immediately put the 16 huge stone tablets into his spirit ring. Then, he stepped out without hesitation and directly left the white jade pavilion. At the bottom of the pool, in front of the stone statue, the divine turtle was lying quietly. He suddenly turned his head and said to the void, Do you think that little guy can inherit my master's legacy? Aren't you talking nonsense? That little guy can definitely inherit your master's legacy. After all, he's more talented than your master. The ethereal voice suddenly sounded, causing the divine turtle to become angry out of humiliation. He said, Damn it, why do you keep talking about this topic? Aren't you annoying? I'm not annoying, I'm not annoying. If you feel annoyed, little turtle, come and bite me. In the face of the indecent ethereal voice, the divine turtle turned his head and pretended to be asleep. He ignored it. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly shot out from the chest of the stone statue, attracting the attention of the black tortoise, who was pretending to be asleep. Immediately, he saw a young man walking in the air and landing in front of the black tortoise. The divine turtle immediately raised his head and stared at Zhuowen. He asked, You've completely inherited my master's legacy? Zhuowen nodded and did not say a word. Instead, he looked around and asked the divine turtle, The voice that kept talking to you just now, is its name Cheng Huang? How did you know? Did my master say that? The divine turtle widened his eyes and asked excitedly, Yes. As he said that, Zhuowen took out the immortal stone, and a strand of Baifeng's divine consciousness appeared above the immortal stone. Seeing Baifeng's divine consciousness, the divine turtle quickly came in front of him and bowed down. He said excitedly, Master, you're not dead. You're really not dead. Haha. Baifeng looked down at the divine turtle with a guilty look. He said, You've been protecting me for so long. It's been hard on you. The divine turtle shook his head and said, Hee, it's not hard at all. My life was given to me by you, master. Why would I feel wronged? Baifeng nodded. Then he looked through the void and said, Cheng Huang, you pretentious guy. Why aren't you coming out yet? You must have noticed the Fushi cauldron a long time ago. Why didn't you come out to meet me? Before Baifeng could finish, Xiaohe flew out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows and said to Zhuowen and Baifeng, I'm familiar with that guy. I'll call him a few times, and he'll definitely come out obediently. Hee. After saying that, Blackie pointed at the void and shouted, The mount of this Lord Dragon back then, hurry up and come out. Kneel before this Lord Dragon's supreme power. Of course, when Xiaohe said that, the void fell silent for a long time. Damn it. Don't even think about pretending in front of me. I know you're there. Come out now. If you don't come out, I'll drag you out myself. Xiaohe continued to shout. He was still met with silence. At this moment, Xiaohe felt a little embarrassed. He snorted and said, It seems like you're too scared to come out when you see me. But don't worry. Although I'm very powerful, I won't act recklessly. Just come out. Following that, Little Hay was still met with silence. This time, Little Hay was completely enraged. He coldly snorted and suddenly rushed toward the void. Then he realized that he had pounced on nothing. Xiaohe, what are you doing? I've come out a long time ago. I'm standing right here. Why are you going over there? Chapter 1291. Nine Heavens. Purple profound thunder. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at the golden figure in the other space. The voice from earlier had clearly come from Xiaohei's direction, yet the figure that had appeared was in the opposite space. Moreover, it had appeared without a sound. This made Zhuowen's expression change. At the same time, Zhuowen's gaze also landed on the golden figure, silently sizing it up. Within the golden light was a small beast. It was shaped like a fox with horns on its back, golden fur, and golden eyes. "Is this Cheng Huang?" Zhuowen softly muttered as he stared at the little beast within the golden light. "Pretentious brat, you've finally come out. Although I'm mighty, you shouldn't have been so scared that you hid all over the place." Xiaohei coughed dryly in another part of the void, and said pretentiously. A trace of craftiness appeared in Cheng Huang's golden eyes as it chuckled. "Long time no see, little dragon. Look at you. Since when have you become a cute Xiaohei dog? This style suits you very well." Xiaohei's face immediately stiffened. Soon after, it pointed at Cheng Huang and shouted, "Bastard, don't call me little dragon. If you do, I'll beat you into a pulp. Also, which part of this Lord Dragon looks like a dog? I'm clearly the mighty and domineering Great Nether Saint Dragon, alright? Don't spout nonsense if you don't understand." "Is that so? Watch my dog-teasing skills." Cheng Huang smiled. Soon after, it waved its little paw, and a strand of foxtail grass appeared. It then tossed it at Xiaohei. Xiaohei was stunned. It stared at the foxtail grass and stuck out its tongue in a very human-like manner. It curled up its body and extended its claws, continuously chasing after the foxtail grass as it whimpered. This scene completely shocked Zhuowen and the Baifeng. Didn't Xiaohei call itself the Great Nether Saint Dragon? Why was it behaving like a dog in front of the foxtail grass? "Bastard. What do you take me for? Do you really think this Lord Dragon is a dog?" Perhaps he'd noticed Zhuowen and Inferno Crane's strange gazes. Blackie suddenly howled furiously and slapped the green foxtail into pieces before howling furiously at Cheng Huang. Alright, I'm not playing anymore." Cheng Huang chuckled and looked at Zhuowen. "I never imagined that Master's Fushi Cauldron would end up in this little guy's hands. I clearly remember that the Fushi Cauldron wasn't on the Heavenly Armor continent back then. How did you obtain it?" Zhuowen's heart skipped a beat when he heard Cheng Huang's question. Speaking of which, he was the one who had brought the Fushi Cauldron over from Earth. The foreign space-time that Cheng Huang was talking about should be Earth. However, he naturally wouldn't say anything about Earth. He could only laugh and say, "I'm not sure either. I just got it by chance." "Cheng Huang, why are you asking this?" Since the Fushi Cauldron is in Zhuowen's hands, it means that the Fushi Cauldron chose him. This is also his opportunity. Otherwise, how could something like the Fushi Cauldron become this kid's armor soul so easily? Xiaohei came to Zhuowen's side and said with some displeasure. Cheng Huang nodded and smiled. "I'm just asking. Since the Fushi Cauldron has become his armor soul, there's no way I can take it out. If this kid cultivates to the divine transformation realm in the future, he'll have the chance to completely materialize the Fushi Cauldron. But you also became his armor soul. Could it be that you're planning to do the same?" Xiaohei snorted and said, "This Lord Dragon's injuries are too severe. Plus, this kid has the Fushi Cauldron on him. That's why I became his armor soul. If he can really reach the divine transformation realm, Zhuowen won't need me anymore. It'll be normal for me to regain my freedom." Hearing the conversation between the two, Zhuowen somewhat understood. It seemed that after a warrior advanced to the legendary divine transformation realm, the armor soul in their body would materialize. When that time came, Xiaohei and the Fushi Cauldron would be able to completely break away from him. Just as Xiaohei said, if he could really reach the divine transformation realm, he would be standing at the peak of the continent. By then, he probably wouldn't need to rely on the power of the armor soul. Moreover, Xiaohei's biggest wish was to recover. This was also what he had promised Xiaohei back then. Cheng Huang asked again, "If he can't reach the divine transformation realm, will you stay with him until he reaches the end of his life?" Xiaohei did not answer Cheng Huang directly. Instead she said, "I trust Zhuowen." Seeing Xiaohei like this, Zhuowen was moved. He could feel Xiaohei's unreserved trust in him. Suddenly, Xiaohei asked in a deep voice, "Cheng Huang, do you know where Fushi is?" Cheng Huang smiled bitterly and said, "No. The battle back then was too tragic. Even the Fushi cauldron was destroyed. If it weren't for my master, I'm afraid that my soul would have been destroyed. Even you don't know? Xiaohei looked disappointed. However, he quickly recovered and continued. Cheng Huang, the Fushi cauldron is now with Zhuowen. You're the Fushi cauldron's spirit. Why don't you return to the Fushi cauldron? Are you saying that you want me to recognize this kid as my master? Cheng Huang's voice was rather cold. However, Xiaohei shook her head and said, There's no need for that. I know how you feel about Fushi. You just need to stay in the Fushi cauldron. After all, if the Fushi cauldron wants to recover its ability to refine pills, you need to be there. Humph. That's a great idea. You want me to refine pills for this kid and help him break through. Once he reaches the soul transformation realm, he'll be able to turn you into a physical object and regain your freedom. Cheng Huang spoke in a slightly hostile tone. Xiaohei was slightly annoyed and said, Why don't you know what's good for you? I'm only a strand of my soul right now, and you're only an artifact spirit. What can you do without the Fushi cauldron? Can you find Fushi? Can you return to your former glory? The Fushi cauldron has already chosen Zhuowen. Why are you still so stubborn? Cheng Huang fell silent. In the end it sighed softly, and its gaze descended onto Zhuowen. It said, You're Zhuowen, right? I can help you, but you have to promise me 2 things. Zhuowen naturally didn't dare hesitate and hurriedly said, Senior, feel free to speak. I'll naturally agree if I can. Actually, my request is very simple. I do plan on returning to the Fushi cauldron, but you have to help me find my master Fushi. Also, if you're lucky enough to reach the soul transformation realm, then you have to release Xiaohei and the Fushi cauldron. What do you think? Cheng Huang was quite satisfied with Zhuowen's attitude and said softly, Of course, Zhuowen said without hesitation. Xiaohei, however, said rather impatiently, Say, when did you become so wishy-washy? I've been with Zhuowen for many years, so I know him much better than you do. This kid is a man of his word. He promised me these 2 things before, so he definitely won't go back on his word. Cheng Huang nodded and said to Zhuowen, Yes, I hope so. Zhuowen, take out the Fushi cauldron. I'll help you repair it. Zhuowen flicked his finger and immediately took out the damaged Fushi cauldron. Cheng Huang looked at the damaged Fushi cauldron and sighed. I never thought that the Fushi cauldron would be so damaged. I'm afraid it won't be something that can be repaired in a short period of time. With that, Cheng Huang said to the divine turtle, Little turtle, enter the Fushi cauldron with me. You were a member of the Fushi cauldron back then. The divine turtle roared. The formation of the Book of Luo was damaged long ago. I'm now a formation spirit that Master perfected. I have nothing to do with the Fushi cauldron. Little turtle, go ahead. I'm only left with a strand of my consciousness, and Zhuowen has obtained all of my inheritance. It's a wise choice for you to follow him. The Baifeng suddenly said to the divine turtle. Master. The divine turtle looked at the Baifeng with a tinge of sadness in his eyes. In the end, he sighed and turned into a stream of light, entering the Fushi cauldron. Zhuowen saw that there was another diagram on the body of the cauldron opposite the river diagram. There was a divine turtle in the diagram, and the diagram was the Book of Luo. The river diagram and the Book of Luo are complete. Now all that's left is for me to repair it. Cheng Huang's eyes were filled with excitement. He laughed and turned into a ray of golden light that surged into the Fushi cauldron. Immediately, the originally dim Fushi cauldron erupted with an extremely blazing light. Zhuowen could clearly feel that the aura on the surface of the Fushi cauldron was constantly strengthening and perfecting. It was as Cheng Huang had said. He was repairing the Fushi cauldron. The Fushi cauldron is too damaged. Even with the help of the river diagram, the Book of Luo, and Cheng Huang, it won't be completed in a short period of time. Now, you should put the Fushi cauldron away, Xiaohei suddenly said. Zhuowen nodded and put away the Fushi cauldron. He looked at the Baifeng and said, Teacher, are we going out now? The Baifeng nodded. Just as it was about to speak, its expression changed. Immediately, the entire pool shook violently. What's going on? Zhuowen and the Baifeng looked at each other and asked in surprise. Not only the pool, but the entire emperor's tomb also began to tremble. The trembling even began to spread. and it actually extended to the entire Sea of Bitterness. The Black Sea of Bitterness churned with huge black waves that swept up to the sky, and then sprinkled down from the sky. At this moment, it was as if the entire Sea of Bitterness was raining black rain. The black storm around the Emperor's tomb started to weaken. It slowly weakened, and finally stopped dissipating. The nine heavens' purple profound lightning in the dark clouds above the Emperor's tomb started to roar wildly. Countless purple lightning bolts that were as thick as water buckets fell from the sky, and turned into a lightning prison that enveloped the entire Emperor's tomb. At this moment, all the warriors on the countless islands in the Bitter Sea noticed this scene. Soon after, they were stunned to discover that the Emperor's tomb in the distance was slowly rising under the cover of the terrifying nine heavens' purple profound lightning, all the way to 100,000 feet in the sky. Boom! Boom! Chapter 1292. Purple lightning riot in the middle of the endless void in the Emperor's tomb. A huge palace world quietly floated in the air. At this moment, the palace world was filled with dense black chi. Within the black chi, an extremely huge figure slowly stood in the middle of the palace. A pair of small sun-like blood-red eyes pierced through the endless black chi, and looked at the sky above the Emperor's tomb. I want to get out. Even if the price is high, I will charge out. Tiangu's hoarse voice rang out from the black chi. His voice was filled with tyranny. Rumble. In the sky above the Emperor's tomb, the nine heavens' purple profound lightning began to crazily gather within the rolling dark clouds. Like a huge lightning dragon, it twisted its terrifying body and roared as it suddenly swooped down, heavily slamming into the pyramid-shaped Emperor's tomb. Bang bang bang. Under the attack of the huge lightning dragon, the entire Emperor's tomb shook violently. The surface of the Bitter Sea below the Emperor's tomb surged with waves that spread in all directions. In the region where the Emperor's tomb was located, a pitter-patter of black rain rose. On the shore of the pool, Mu Feng's eyes were filled with fear. He naturally felt the tremors that permeated the entire Emperor's tomb, and could not help but exclaim, "What's going on? Why is there such a terrifying tremor in the Emperor's tomb?" Tiangu's eyes lit up as he laughed towards the sky. The day of the nine heavens' purple profound lightning riot has finally arrived. Originally, I thought that I would have to rely on that old fart's inheritance to escape. Now there's no need for that, haha. Nine heavens' purple profound lightning riot? Mu Feng's eyes were filled with astonishment. Having stayed in the Bitter Sea for close to 100 years, he naturally knew what the nine heavens' purple profound lightning riot was. The nine heavens' purple profound lightning was a strange lightning that existed in the Emperor's tomb. Ever since the Emperor's tomb was formed, the nine heavens' purple profound lightning was extremely powerful. An ordinary nine heavens' purple profound lightning was enough to kill a peak heavenly venerable practitioner. The more powerful nine heavens' purple profound lightning could even threaten a martial emperor practitioner. After countless years of condensation, the nine heavens' purple profound lightning above the Emperor's tomb would increase. It was like a pool of water. If too much water was poured in, it would overflow. The principle of the nine heavens' purple profound lightning was similar. Once too much nine heavens' purple profound lightning was gathered, there would be a huge explosion. The eruption this time was called the Nine Heavens Purple Profound Thunder Riot by the Bitter Sea martial artists. Mu Feng, there's no need to wait any longer. Follow me back to the palace world, and set up the boundless lightning drawing grand formation. Once I'm free, I'll help you blast open this old bastard's land of inheritance. His inheritance will all be yours. The heavenly insect illusory figure laughed out loud. With a wave of his right hand, a large hand that was formed from black chi grabbed Mu Feng and disappeared in front of the pool. At the bottom of the pool, Zhuowen and the Baifeng looked at each other. The Baifeng's expression became somewhat ugly. He said in a low voice, "It's the nine heavens purple profound lightning. This is bad. The nine heavens purple profound lightning has accumulated above the Emperor's tomb for hundreds of years. Now that it has suddenly erupted, its energy will be extremely terrifying. Perhaps the heavenly insect can borrow the power of the nine heavens purple profound lightning to break through the seal." What? Zhuowen's expression changed slightly, and he said, We have to get out quickly. We have to stop that heavenly worm from breaking the seal. The Baifeng nodded and entered the immortal stone. Zhuowen brought Xiaohei and flew toward the surface of the pool. Rumble. Rumbling 9 heavens, purple profound lightning began to gather in the clouds. Previously, when the lightning dragon bombarded the emperor's tomb, it had caused the emperor's tomb to shake violently. Now, the 9 heavens purple profound lightning gathered again, transforming into thousands of lightning snakes. Every lightning snake was 1,000 feet long. Thousands of lightning snakes shot out and bombarded the emperor's tomb. An even more intense tremor spread out. The bitter sea boiled, and water pillars rose into the sky like countless black pythons. It's the 9 heavens purple profound lightning. Why would it erupt at this time? Countless warriors on the islands of the bitter sea raised their heads and looked at the terrifying 9 heavens purple profound lightning above the emperor's tomb. Their eyes were filled with shock. Although many of the islands in the Sea of Misery had been destroyed due to the celestial insect's clone, making them desolate and uninhabited, the Sea of Misery was extremely vast. No matter how many clones there were back then, it was impossible for them to envelop all the islands in the Sea of Misery in a short amount of time. Therefore, although many islands had been destroyed by the heavenly insect avatar, there were still some islands that were further away that were still intact. On the Auspicious God Island, many students of the Auspicious God Academy had also noticed the 9 heavens purple profound lightning erupting in the direction of the emperor's tomb. 2 beautiful figures slowly walked out from a huge building in the middle of the academy. The 2 figures had graceful figures. One was a young woman with a voluptuous figure, and the other was a young girl with a delicate face. Both of them had a pair of thin wings behind their backs, and the key parts of their bodies were covered with fur. They looked exceptionally seductive. Aunt Yao, that's the direction of the emperor's tomb. Master's body. Wu Dai's beautiful eyes gathered on the 9 heavens purple profound lightning in the distance, and her eyes were filled with worry. Yao Dai's face became a little ugly and said, "The 9 heavens purple profound lightning erupting. This is very likely related to the heavenly insect avatar. Wu Dai, Aunt Yao wants to go over and take a look. You stay on the Auspicious God Island first." Wu Dai directly stood in front of Yao Dai and said angrily, "Aunt Yao, I want to go too. I'm a demon emperor now, so I want to go over and take a look." Yao Dai looked at the stubborn Wu Dai and sighed. "All right, but if there's any danger, you must leave first. Do you understand?" Wu Dai nodded, and a trace of a smile appeared in her beautiful eyes. "Demon soldiers, gather and set up the demon god array." Yao Dai and Wu Dai flew into the sky, and Yao Dai's majestic voice echoed throughout the entire academy. Instantly, countless demon soldiers with powerful auras flew out from every corner of the academy and lined up neatly in the void. Waves of demon chi filled the air and turned into 1,000 feet large demon god avatar. Many students of the Auspicious God Academy looked at the huge demon god avatar, and their eyes were filled with reverence. The demon soldiers in the demon god array were all demon emperors, and every one of them was stronger than them. Even their academy's principal would find it difficult to suppress the demon god. Boom! Boom! The demon god avatar appeared, and with a step, it headed towards the emperor's tomb. A figure suddenly broke out of the water above the emperor's tomb's pool, before slowly landing on the shore. He looked around, before speaking in a rather surprised manner. Mu Feng and the heavenly insect's illusory figure are actually not here? With the 9 heavens purple profound lightning going berserk, those 2 fellows must be in a hurry to break the seal. Xiaohei said indifferently. Let's go. Let's go to the palace world." Zhuowen nodded, and with a step, 3 pairs of lightning wings unfurled behind his back. His entire person turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared from where he stood. In the palace world, Mu Feng's hands danced in the air above the surging black qi. His movements were like flowing water, and it was quite beautiful. As he continued to dance, the outline of a huge array appeared in the air above the black qi. After the array was formed, Mu Feng waved his sleeves, and countless crystals poured out from his spiritual ring. Soon after, Mu Feng shouted, "Lightning drawl," as he said that. the 9 heavens purple profound lightning above the emperor's tomb became even more terrifying. Soon after, the array started to emit a pillar of light, which led to the top of the emperor's tomb. Rumble! Under the bombardment of the pillar of light, a huge gap appeared at the top of the emperor's tomb. Like a magnet, the 9 heavens purple profound lightning in the air surged towards the gap. Like a river of 9 heavens purple profound lightning, it was extremely terrifying. Bang bang bang! Countless purple lightning bolts descended, bombarding the palace world. At the same time, Mu Feng activated the limitless lightning drawing grand array and directed the 9 heavens purple profound lightning that had gathered towards the gigantic black chain around the heavenly insect's waist. Crackle crackle crackle! At the instant when the lightning bolts landed on the chain, countless electrical sparks started to spread out. Strange sounds rang out, and the entire chain started to shake intensely. Still not enough, continue. The heavenly insect's deep voice rang out. Mu Feng nodded his head and started to fully activate the limitless lightning drawing grand array. Rolling lightning bolts continued to descend from the sky, causing the black chain to shake intensely once again. Furthermore, the frequency of the shaking was even higher than before. At the same time, the heavenly insect was using its supreme might to complement the power of the 9 heavens purple profound lightning to continuously bombard the final thick ceiling chain. 1,000 meters away from the palace world, Zhuowen with 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back appeared. His gaze landed on the heavenly insect that was continuously bombarding the ceiling chain, as his face turned extremely ugly. Stop him! With a fierce roar, Zhuowen shot straight towards Mu Feng, who was continuously operating the infinite lightning drawing grand array. Immortal force surged out from his body as he drew out a slaughtering array diagram in one go, before sending it enveloping Mu Feng. Damn it! It's that Zhuowen! Why did he come out of the inheritance land at this time? Mu Feng, who was originally guiding the 9 heavens purple profound lightning, naturally saw Zhuowen charging towards him, causing his face to instantly turn extremely ugly. Continue to attract lightning. Let this king block this brat. The deep voice of the heavenly insect rang out, causing Mu Feng's originally somewhat flustered state of mind to slowly calm down, before continuing to guide the 9 heavens purple profound lightning. With a furious roar, the heavenly insect exploded out with endless black chi, before transforming into 10 gigantic heavenly insect phantoms that were several hundred feet long before Mu Feng. Roar! With a roar, the 10 heavenly insect phantoms stomped towards Zhuowen with their legs that were akin to pillars that supported the heavens. Every single step they took possessed a terrifying might that could shatter the heavens and shatter the earth. Slaughtering array diagram, break for me! With a low roar, Zhuowen sent the slaughtering array diagram shooting out. Countless slaughtering sword phantoms that were akin to densely packed blood clouds slammed into the bodies of the 10 gigantic heavenly insect phantoms, causing the latter to stagger back a few steps. Human, your strength is too weak. You dare to obstruct this king from breaking the seal? You're simply courting death. The heavenly insect burst out in hearty laughter, while a look of disdain flashed across his eyes. Courting death? I don't think so. With a cold sneer, Zhuowen immediately took out immortal stones and condensed even purer immortal energy. Extending his hands out into the void, he started to slowly move them, before drawing out the slaughtering, exterminating and exterminating array diagrams. 4 slaughtering array diagram, kill for me. The moment the 4 slaughtering array diagram appeared, the 10 heavenly insect phantoms were instantly shredded into nothingness under the power of the slaughtering ultimacy. At the same time, Zhuowen took a step forward, shooting towards Mu Feng like a hot knife through butter. Chapter 1293. Great Tomb Array Bastard. Lightning Dragon. Seeing Zhuowen rushing straight towards him, Mu Feng's eyes shrunk slightly. With a stern howl, the seal formed by his hand changed. Countless 9 heavens purple profound lightning descended from the sky, gathering together to form a gigantic lightning dragon. At the instant he attracted the gigantic lightning dragon, Mu Feng took a gentle step forward, entering the palace world. Rushing to the side of the heavenly worm, He stared at Zhuowen with fear in his eyes. The 10 doppelgangers formed by the heavenly worm were instantly annihilated by Zhuowen. Such combat strength caused even him to tremble. Swoosh! Zhuowen stopped outside the palace world. His gaze landed on Mu Feng as he coldly said, "Mu Feng, didn't you want to capture me? Now that I've appeared in front of you, why have you fled instead?" Mu Feng's expression was ugly. Looking at the 4 kills array around Zhuowen, shock and fear were revealed in his eyes. This array was definitely not something that a mere Zhuowen had set up. It was very likely that Zhuowen had obtained it from the inheritance grounds. "You've obtained the inheritance of the Emperor Tomb's owner?" Mu Feng's voice gradually turned dark and cold. "What do you think?" Zhuowen replied in an indifferent manner. Although killing intent was surging within his eyes, he did not dare to enter the palace world. The lesson of the Blood Devil was still deeply etched in his mind. He did not believe that his current strength was stronger than the Blood Devil. Even the Blood Devil had been absorbed by the heavenly worm after entering the palace world, and could only use the blood escape to escape. As expected, Zhuowen, if you have the ability, come in and kill me now. Mu Feng narrowed his eyes, and suddenly spoke in a somewhat mocking manner. Zhuowen's expression hardened slightly, as he stared at the endless black qi within the palace world, as well as the squirming heavenly worm figure within it. With a cold snort, he planned to enter the palace world. However, he was stopped by the Baifeng. "Zhuowen, don't go in. The heavenly worm's strength is getting stronger and stronger. Furthermore, the palace world has already become the heavenly worm's domain. Its strength inside is extremely terrifying. You'll be like a lamb entering the mouth of a tiger if you enter." The Baifeng spoke in a solemn manner. Zhuowen's footsteps paused for a moment before he frowned and asked, "Teacher, what should I do?" "Let's leave the monarch's tomb. This monarch's tomb was built by me back then. Although I am only a strand of my consciousness now, I can still activate the mechanisms of the monarch's tomb with the help of the celestial stone. This heavenly insect is too dangerous. Even if I have to destroy the entire monarch's tomb, I will destroy this heavenly insect," Baifeng said in a low voice. Zhuowen felt a chill in his heart. No wonder Baifeng wanted him to leave the emperor's tomb now. It turned out that he planned to completely destroy the emperor's tomb. This emperor's tomb was extremely huge, and the energy it contained was probably earth-shattering. Once it self-destructed, even if the sky worm escaped, it would be difficult to withstand the power of the emperor's tomb. "Go!" After saying that, Zhuowen took a step forward and turned into a bolt of lightning. He left the palace world at an extremely fast speed. Rumble! At the instant Zhuowen left, the terrifying lightning dragon in the sky above the palace world roared. Under Mu Feng's guidance, it heavily bombarded the last chain behind the sky worm. Countless bolts of lightning filled the air. Strands of lightning were like little snakes, as they continuously slithered around the surface of the chain. At the same time, the sky worm roared furiously and violently smashed its fist against the chain. Instantly, the sound of metal clashing rang out. "Break!" The heavenly worm roared. Borrowing the power of the lightning dragon, it began to continuously bombard the chain. Punch after punch, one could only hear a cracking sound. Under the combined attacks of the lightning dragon and the heavenly worm, the chain finally shattered completely, turning into countless Black Death years. Bang! At the instant when the chain shattered, the black aura in the entire palace world boiled and churned. A wave of evil and vast aura swept out. Mu Feng, who was standing by the side, trembled all over when he sensed this aura. His face turned pale. "So strong! Is this the full extent of the Lord's strength?" Mu Feng trembled slightly. At this moment, the pressure radiating from the sky worm's body was truly too terrifying. If not for his cultivation as an arcane heavenly master, he might have already knelt on the ground under this pressure. At the entrance of the tomb, Zhuowen seemed to have sensed something. Turning his head slightly, he stopped and looked into the distance. Staring at the palace world far behind him, his expression fluctuated unpredictably. "Let's go. I'm afraid that the sky worm has already escaped. Let's quickly leave the emperor's tomb," said the Baifeng in a deep voice. Zhuowen nodded. Without further delay, he took a step forward and walked out of the tomb. After exiting the ravine, he arrived in the sky above the emperor's tomb. So many corpses. Were all these done by the sky worm? The instant he appeared in the sky above the ground, Zhuowen looked down. His pupils shrank slightly as he saw the corpses of cultivators everywhere. Furthermore, these corpses were all shriveled up, looking just like dried corpses. Previously, Zhuowen's Buddhist avatar had left in a hurry, so he did not take a closer look. Now that his main body had arrived on the ground that was already in a mess, his eyes could not help but emit a cold light. Although he was not someone who bemoaned the state of the universe and pitied the fate of mankind, these were human cultivators after all. To have their flesh and blood sucked dry by a monster like the sky worm, and die in such a miserable manner, he naturally felt somewhat displeased. Haha, after trapping me for nearly 1,000 years, I'm finally going to come out. A thunderous voice rang out from the ravine below. It was like a great bell, ringing in Zhuowen's ears. At the same time, he saw that the strange black gas had spread out once again. It was actually sweeping towards the ground. Let's go. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with shock. The 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back unfurled, and he instantly disappeared from the sky above the ground. When he appeared at the entrance of the emperor's tomb, the Baifeng's strand of divine sense appeared from the celestial stone. He formed a seal with his hands, and waves of celestial force were created from the celestial stone. Then, the entrance to the emperor's tomb was sealed. Master! Not long after Zhuowen left the emperor's tomb, a clear voice rang out. Then, Zhuowen saw the huge demon god not far away step forward. Wu Dai flew out from the center of the demon god array and came to Zhuowen's side. She hugged Zhuowen without hesitation, causing the latter's expression to become extremely awkward. Yao Dai, who was in the center of the demon god array, quietly looked at Wu Dai and Zhuowen with a knowing smile. But soon, her gaze gathered on the celestial stone's illusory figure, and her delicate body could not help but be stunned. Master! Yao Dai spat out these 2 words with difficulty. Her eyes were fixed on the Baifeng's divine sense, and there was a trace of mist in her beautiful eyes. She took a step forward and came before the Baifeng. Her voice trembled as she said, Master, you are really master? The Baifeng quietly looked at Yao Dai and sighed softly. Yao Dai, didn't I ask you to lead the demon soldiers out of the emperor's tomb back then? You actually stayed in there all this time. It's really hard on you. Zhuowen had naturally told the Baifeng about Yao Dai and the demon soldiers. Therefore, after seeing Yao Dai, the Baifeng was not too surprised. Instead, it was a little emotional. It's not hard on me, it's not hard on me. Yao Dai is willing to do all this. Yao Dai shook her head and smiled sweetly. Rumble. Suddenly the emperor's tomb, which was originally sealed, began to shake violently. The huge pyramid on the Sea of Bitterness shook continuously, causing monstrous waves to rise. Baifeng, you can't trap me. Even if you seal all the entrances to the emperor's tomb, you still can't trap me. A thunderous voice resounded from the emperor's tomb. It was like an echo that spread out in all directions. It resounded through the clouds, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. The heavenly worm has broken the seal. Yao Dai's face was slightly pale, and her voice trembled as she spoke. The Baifeng nodded. Its eyes were grave as it said, Looks like the heavenly worm's power has exceeded my expectations. It can actually shake the emperor's tomb. As it spoke, the Baifeng's gaze landed on Zhuowen and Yao Dai. It said, Zhuowen, Yao Dai, take everyone and retreat 1,000 miles away. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He knew that the Baifeng was planning to destroy the entire emperor's tomb. The emperor's tomb was simply too huge. The array within it was probably extremely terrifying. He wondered if the Baifeng could withstand the array within the emperor's tomb. Teacher you, Zhuowen said hesitantly. The Baifeng smiled and said, Don't worry. Although the array within the emperor's tomb is huge, and I am only a strand of divine thought, I can use the immortal stone to borrow your power to activate the array within the emperor's tomb. Moreover, the array within the emperor's tomb was already set up by me 1,000 years ago. Activating it won't consume too much energy. Zhuowen nodded when he heard that. He took Wu Dai and retreated in the opposite direction of the emperor's tomb. Yao Dai also took the demon god array and retreated majestically. Boom, 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 boom. 1,000 miles away, Zhuowen and the others stared silently at the shaking emperor's tomb. Their eyes were filled with seriousness because they discovered that the emperor's tomb was shaking much more violently than before. Countless black storms swept through the embittered sea, as well as pitter-patter black rain. Zhuowen, channel all your mental energy and yuan force into the immortal stone and help me, the Baifeng said to Zhuowen in a deep voice. Zhuowen did not hesitate. Holding the immortal stone in his right hand, the mental energy and yuan force in his Naiwan palace flowed into the immortal stone like rivers flowing into the sea. Immediately, milky white immortal force erupted from the immortal stone and surged out. Zhuowen's mental energy had already reached the arcane heavenly master realm, and his yuan force had already reached the emperor realm. The immortal force he gathered was even purer and more vigorous than before. As the milky white immortal force surged out, it entered the Baifeng's divine thought. The Baifeng squinted its eyes and formed seals with its hands. The seals were so complicated that even Zhuowen felt his eyes swell up when he saw them. Tomb array open. After forming the last seal, the Baifeng slowly said these words. At this moment, the Thearch's tomb thousands of kilometers away began to shrink. The thick, yellow stone on the surface began to move, and as it shrank, the Thearch's tomb began to expand once more. Whoosh! Chapter 1294. Play. The depths of the emperor's tomb had already been corroded by the black qi. Tiangu's body became even more imposing and terrifying. Countless tentacles shot out from the black qi. They were like thousands of ropes as they interweaved in the void. Oh, that old bastard has actually closed the emperor's tomb. Perhaps sensing something, Tiangu's body paused. His blood-red eyes pierced through the void and landed on the surroundings of the emperor's tomb. He could sense that the entrances to the emperor's tomb had all been sealed. Boom, boom, boom. Not long after the entrances were sealed, Tiangu's sharp senses discovered that waves of terrifying energy had begun to surge out from the emperor's tomb. The energy contained destructive power. Oh no, is that old bastard going to activate the tomb formation? Damn it. Tiangu's blood-red eyes immediately revealed a panicked expression when he sensed the energy from the depths of the emperor's tomb. Tiangu had been trapped in the emperor's tomb for nearly 1,000 years. His understanding of the emperor's tomb was basically no less than that of the Baifeng. Naturally, he knew that there was an extremely terrifying formation in the emperor's tomb. The formation was called the Tomb Formation. It was something that the Baifeng had spent a great deal of effort to set up when it was building the emperor's tomb. Its power was extremely terrifying. Its purpose was to increase its power at the cost of destroying the emperor's tomb to suppress Tiangu. Back then, Tiangu had used everything he had to completely suppress the Baifeng, causing the latter's soul to almost scatter. He did not have any extra strength to activate the tomb formation. In the end, the Baifeng could only temporarily seal Tiangu in the emperor's tomb. Logically speaking, the old bastard Baifeng's soul should have either been scattered or only left with a strand of his consciousness. In such a state, it is impossible for him to activate the tomb formation. Tiangu frowned slightly and muttered in a somewhat low voice, "Sir, I'm afraid that this has something to do with Zhuowen. After all, the Baifeng's inheritance was obtained by Zhuowen." Mu Feng's eyes were filled with panic. He arrived beside Tiangu and spoke with a trembling voice. He could also sense the terrifying destructive energy in the depths of the emperor's tomb. He knew that the energy was not something that he could endure. "Bastard!" Tiangu roared furiously. Immediately, the endless black qi within the god tomb began to shrink towards Tiangu's body. It began to form many black barriers around his body. As the black qi continued to gather, the black barriers began to become thicker and thicker. There were faint signs that they were turning into keratin. "Sir, there's still me." Looking at this scene, Mu Feng could not help but speak up. He was truly afraid that the heavenly insect would abandon him. "Get your ass in here. That tomb formation is about to be activated." The celestial insect didn't waste any more words. On the surface of the black barrier, a hole as tall as a person appeared. Mu Feng's eyes lit up with joy as he hurriedly entered the hole. After he entered the hole closed up and returned to its original state. At this moment, the emperor's tomb had risen to a height of 10,000 miles in the outside world. A supreme and terrifying energy began to flow out from the emperor's tomb. Moreover, the energy was becoming more and more terrifying. Milky white light began to appear in the cracks of the huge rocks on the surface of the emperor's tomb. The light became more and more intense, and it almost dyed the entire emperor's tomb white. Bai Feng muttered. Suddenly, the emperor's tomb exploded under the milky white light. At this moment, the entire sea of bitterness seemed to have quietened down. The white light that filled the sky spread out, and the originally dark sea of bitterness turned into a vast expanse of white. Everywhere one could see, there was only white, a dazzling white. The emperor's tomb exploded. On the countless islands in the sea of bitterness, all the martial artists raised their heads. Looking at the emperor's tomb that was filled with terrifying white light, they opened their mouths and revealed shocked expressions. The emperor's tomb was extremely symbolic in the sea of bitterness. After all, the emperor's tomb would open once every 300 years. It contained the coveted heart of imperial power, as well as other good things. However, many martial artists felt that something was wrong with the emperor's tomb this time. After all, the disaster caused by Tiangu's clone was still vivid in the minds of many martial artists in the Sea of Bitterness. Now that the emperor's tomb suddenly moved, rising to the sky and exploding, many martial artists in the Sea of Bitterness felt that something was wrong. Something must have happened in the emperor's tomb. Hence, many martial artists in the Sea of Bitterness were discussing what had happened in the emperor's tomb. The terrifying white light lasted for nearly half an hour before it finally subsided. The white light in the sky faded away, revealing the dusky sky of the Sea of Bitterness. The void where the emperor's tomb was located was filled with spatial cracks. Terrifying hurricanes swept out from the cracks. It was the wind of the void in the spatial cracks. It was extremely terrifying. In the region surrounded by countless spatial cracks, a lump of black paste was wriggling continuously. As the paste wriggled, it emitted an extremely frightening and sinister sound. Bai Feng, Zhuowen, both of you deserve to die. How dare you trick me? 1,000 miles away, Zhuowen and the Bai Feng's pupils shrank. Under such a terrifying tomb array, this Tiangu was still alive. How could this fellow's life force be so vigorous? With great difficulty, Mu Feng squeezed his way out of the wriggling paste. His face was as pale as snow, while his eyes were filled with shock and fear. The Great Burial Formation was too terrifying. Even though the heavenly insect had unleashed all of its abilities to create an exceedingly thick black barrier, it was still seriously injured by such a terrifying explosion. Boom! The wriggling paste body quickly regained its shape and regained the appearance of a heavenly worm. However, the aura on the heavenly worm's body was not as powerful as it was when it escaped. Instead, it was much weaker. Zhuowen could even see black qi continuously seeping out from the surface of the heavenly worm. After the black qi spread, it was annihilated in the air and disappeared. Clearly, the black qi was the source of Tiangu. At this moment, due to his serious injuries, his source was constantly dissipating. Bastard, bastard, bastard. Tiangu was flustered and exasperated. He said bastard 3 times in a row. From this, one could see how angry he was in his heart. After breaking the seal, his strength had almost reached the level of a half-saint. However, due to the power of the tomb array, he was seriously injured, and his strength was far from his peak. This Tiangu's life source is so powerful. The tomb array can't kill him? The Bai Feng frowned and sighed. Zhuowen and Bai Feng, you old bastard. It's really the two of you. Die. After cursing for a while, Skyworm's eyes locked onto Zhuowenha, who was a Bai Feng formed by Zhuowenha's divine consciousness. With a roar, its enormous body rushed over. Zhuowen, be careful. Enter the demon god array, and deal with this Tiangu together. Looking at the approaching Tiangu, Yao Dai's expression changed drastically. She grabbed Wu Dai and entered the core of the demon god array. At the same time, she called out to Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen shook his head. His eyes were blazing as he stared at the approaching Tiangu. He said, Senior Yao Dai, you don't have to interfere in this matter. Let me deal with this Tiangu. Due to the terrifying explosive power of the tomb array, Tiangu's strength had been reduced to less than 10%. Zhuowen wanted to see if he was a match for Tiangu. Yao Dai and Wu Dai were stunned. Soon after, Yao Dai shouted, "Are you crazy? This is a Tiangu. My master once died because of it. How can you deal with it?" However, Zhuowen shook his head. He took a step forward and rushed directly toward Tiangu. Within his body, a monstrous dragon roar resounded and rushed into the sky. Then, a terrifying black light rushed out from between his eyebrows. Roar! The black light rushed out and turned into a dragon's body. A pair of small sun-like golden eyes emitted an extremely cold light. The great Nether Saint Dragon? Bastard, die! Tiangu's eyes were cold as he roared angrily. "You want me to die? You don't have the right." Blackie let out a cold laugh. Its enormous dragon claws descended from the sky and heavily collided with the 12 arms of the heavenly worm. Immediately, a frightening force erupted. An extremely ear-piercing explosion resounded in the sky above the Sea of Bitterness, and huge waves rose from the surface of the Sea of Bitterness. How terrifying! That black dragon is too terrifying. It actually has a dragon's body. What kind of existence is it? On the island, countless cultivators in the Sea of Misery raised their heads and looked up at the great Nether Saint Dragon and Tiangu, who were fighting in the sky. Their eyes were filled with shock. Whether it was the great Nether Saint Dragon or Tiangu, the power that they displayed was too terrifying. It could be said that a casual blow from the two had the power to shatter heaven and earth. If an ordinary Emperor Realm cultivator came into contact with the aftermath of their battle, they would be annihilated immediately. At this moment, all the cultivators on the wonderful Spirit Island raised their heads. They naturally saw the great Nether Divine Dragon and Tiangu floating in the sky. The shock in their eyes became even more intense, because they also saw a figure on the great Nether Saint Dragon. With their martial strength, they could naturally see things in the distance. They naturally saw the figure on the great Nether Saint Dragon clearly. This figure was no stranger to them. It was the genius of the wonderful Spirit Academy, Zhuowen. Zhuowen had once caused a great uproar in the academy. Most of the cultivators on the wonderful Spirit Island naturally recognized Zhuowen. "It's Zhuowen. It's actually Zhuowen. That terrifying dragon was summoned by Zhuowen?" All the cultivators on the wonderful Spirit Island were shocked. After the shock, they revealed extremely excited expressions. They could all feel the terror of the great Nether Saint Dragon and Tiangu. After all, Zhuowen was a member of the wonderful Spirit Academy. Zhuowen calmly stared at the great Nether Divine Dragon and Tiangu, who were constantly fighting. After a while, his gaze fell on Mufeng, who was not far away. He smiled faintly and said, "Master Mufeng, why don't the two of us play?" Mufeng, who had just experienced the burial array, had just recovered. At this moment, when he saw that Zhuowen was looking at him, his face couldn't help but stiffen. "What? You don't dare?" The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curved as he smiled. Why wouldn't I dare? Without the great Nether Saint Dragon, how much strength can you display?" Chapter 1295. Against Mufeng, that's Grandmaster Mufeng. Why does it seem like Grandmaster Mufeng and Zhuowen are going to fight? When many cultivators on the excellent Spirit Island saw Mufeng rushing towards Zhuowen, their eyes were filled with astonishment. Grandmaster Mufeng was the most respected Arcana Heavenly Master in their excellent Spirit Island. As for Zhuowen, he was the most monstrous genius in their outer courtyard. When the two of them suddenly faced each other, it naturally caused many people to be puzzled. Zhuowen, Mo Yen, and Bai Yen did not mention anything about Mufeng colluding with the heavenly insects. After all, it was extremely complicated to explain. Therefore, they did not mention anything about it. They only briefly mentioned that there was a terrifying creature sealed within the Emperor's tomb. This also caused many of the auspicious Spirit Island's martial artists to have puzzled looks in their eyes. Perhaps Zhuowen had offended Grandmaster Mufeng in some way? Although Zhuowen has already advanced to the Emperor realm, I'm afraid that he's going to be in big trouble when facing Grandmaster Mufeng. Although many people felt puzzled by the scene of Zhuo when fighting against Grandmaster Mufeng, The majority of them had strange expressions in their eyes. That was because they felt that Mu Feng, as a heavenly arcana master, possessed strength far above Zhuo Wen's. In the eyes of the cultivators on the Excellent Spirit Island, this was a battle without any suspense. Seeing Mu Feng rushing over, Zhuo Wen's eyes gawked, before he laughed involuntarily and shook his head. From the looks of it, Mu Feng had completely attributed Zhuo Wen's strength to Wuxia. Of course, if Mu Feng really thought so, he would be in big trouble. Zhuo Wen did not say anything. He formed a seal with his right hand and said in a low voice, "Slaughtering array." Boom! Zhuo Wen's right hand drew an outline in the air. The slaughtering array appeared in the air. Waves of slaughtering aura rushed out from the slaughtering array and turned into countless slaughtering sword shadows. Mu Feng's gaze sank. With a wave of his sleeve, surging mental energy gathered and turned into a huge mental energy hand. It came crashing down from the sky and smashed towards the slaughtering array. Bang! Under the bombardment of the giant spiritual hand, the slaughter array actually began to tremble. Your strength really does depend on the extreme abyss, Saint Dragon. If it wasn't for it, you wouldn't be my match at all. Mu Feng's eyes were filled with disdain as he watched the spiritual giant hand suppress the slaughtering array, as he coldly mocked. Killing array diagram. Zhuo Wen completely ignored Mu Feng's mocking words. With a tap of his right hand, another array diagram appeared. This was the killing array diagram of the four murders array diagram. Murderous will filled the air. Countless silhouettes rushed out from the matrix, stepping on the void. They held the swords of slaughter in their hands as they stepped forward. Break! Zhuo Wen spat out this word in an indifferent voice. That terrifyingly powerful mental energy hand was directly destroyed and dissipated. Zhuo Wen took a step forward and continued to charge forward with the slaughter and slaughter array diagrams. Looks like you have some ability. Mu Feng faintly knitted his eyebrows. With a wave of his sleeve, numerous yuan crystals shot out. In the next moment, 9 dragon roars that blotted the skies rang out from within the yuan crystals. 9 dragons array break for me. At the instant when the 9 dragon roars rang out, 9 giant dragons shot out from the yuan crystals. 9 gigantic dragon bodies stretched across the void, giving off an exceedingly frightening aura. Killing array diagram out. Without the slightest bit of hesitation, Zhuo Wen took out the 3rd array diagram. Murderous will radiated from it. Upon sensing the murderous will radiating from it, a sliver of despair involuntarily rose within Mu Feng's heart. This was the frightening concept contained within the killing array diagram. Bang bang bang. 3 array diagrams appeared in the void, their might increasing by several times. Under the might of the 3 array diagrams, the 9 dragons array was actually continuously being pushed back. What? There are actually 3 array diagrams. Furthermore, each one is more frightening than the previous one. Looking at the 3 array diagrams that were floating in the void, their might increasing explosively, Mu Feng's eyes narrowed to the extreme. With a cold snort he waved his sleeve. A blood-colored crystal shot out, and was sent into the 9 dragons array. Berserk 9 dragons array. As his words rang out, the 9 giant dragons within the 9 dragons array started to glow with a blood-red hue. Furthermore, their bodies continued to expand, expanding by more than 2 times their original size. The 9 pairs of dragon eyes were filled with a frightening blood-red hue, while their auras were more than several times stronger than before. At the same time, their retreating momentum came to a halt. I'll make you feel complete despair. Taking a step forward in the air, Zhuo Wen looked down at the 9 giant dragons from above. In the next instant, his right hand tapped out in the air once again. This action of Zhuo Wen's caused Mu Feng's heart to beat rapidly. This fellow still has a 4th array diagram? How is that possible? Mu Feng cried out in shock, his eyes filled with disbelief. Killing array diagram. Come out, form the 4 kills array diagram. Borrowing the power of the immortal stone, Zhuo Wen condensed extremely pure and powerful immortal energy. He started to draw unceasingly in the void, before finally forming the killing array diagram. Only then was waves of destructive energy able to explosively shoot out from the killing array diagram. Whoosh! The killing array diagram shot out, landing in the middle of the massacre, slaughter, and extermination array diagrams. With the might of 4 directions, they formed the frightening 4 kills array diagram, while the killing intent seemingly filled the entire void surrounding the 4 kills array diagram. At the instant when the 4 kills array diagram was formed, the Berserk 9 Dragons array started to show signs of fear. The 9 giant dragons started to whimper, while their eyes were filled with dread. The might and power displayed by the 4 kills array diagram was too frightening. Like a towering mountain, it firmly suppressed the 9 giant dragons, causing them to not dare to make any reckless movements. Puff! The 4 kills array diagram possessed an extremely powerful killing force. Under the might of the 4 kills array diagram, the 9 giant dragons didn't even have the chance to make a sound before they were instantly turned into countless blood foams. Impossible! At the instant when the 9 dragons array diagram was destroyed, Mufeng spat out a mouthful of blood as he flew back. His face was as pale as snow, while the corners of his mouth trembled as he involuntarily cried out in shock. Impossible? You're telling me that it's impossible? Don't you find it laughable? Zhuan sneered. With a point of his right hand, the 4 kills array diagram descended from the sky, rumbling towards Mufeng. No! Mufeng's eyes narrowed slightly. With a wave of his sleeve, countless yuan crystals shot out. At the same time, the powerful mental energy within his Naiwan palace started to revolve at high speeds, causing the countless yuan crystals to revolve in a mysterious pattern, forming a nebula defense. Bang! The defense of the nebula was extremely sturdy. As the 4 kills array diagram smashed down, it was completely unable to shatter the defense of the nebula, causing it to appear as though it had stopped moving. Grief Treasure Seal. At the instant when the 4 kills array diagram stopped moving, Zhuan unleashed the Grief Treasure Seal of the 7 Emotions Treasure Seal. A gigantic grief gushed out from the void. As a sorrowful aura gushed out, it started to continuously weaken the nebula, causing its defense to continuously decrease. Crack. In the end, under the continuous weakening of the Grief Treasure Seal, cracks finally started to appear on the nebula. As the killing force of the 4 kills array diagram came crushing down, the nebula instantly shattered into pieces. Mufeng extended both of his hands, while his mental energy formed an extremely sturdy defense before him. However, under the killing force of the 4 kills array diagram, this defense was completely useless, as it shattered instantly. In fact, under the killing force of the 4 kills array diagram, Mufeng's hands were instantly turned into a bloody pulp. If not for the fact that Mufeng had managed to escape in time, his entire being might have been annihilated into nothingness by the killing force. Arg! Zhuan! Mufeng howled miserably towards the sky, while his eyes were filled with shock and fear. He stared intently at Zhuan, who was looking down at him from above, while his heart started to tremble in fear. Before entering the emperor's tomb, he was an existence that Zhuan could only look up to. However, after exiting the emperor's tomb, he had actually suffered such a miserable defeat at the hands of Zhuan, to the point of not being able to retaliate at all. Whoosh! Zhuan took a step forward, while the 4 kills array diagram hovered in the air behind him. Waves of killing force were akin to wind blades as they flashed past Mufeng's face, causing Mufeng's heart to be on tenterhooks, while his heart was filled with anxiety. Zhuan extended his right hand, before grabbing Mufeng by one hand. Quietly looking at the flustered Mufeng before him, he said in an indifferent tone, "Even without Xiaohe, it seems that I'm still able to easily defeat you, and even kill you with a single strike." Mufeng remained silent, while his face alternated between green and white, while a look of humiliation appeared in his eyes. In the past, Zhuan was a brat that he had never placed in his eyes. However, at this moment, he was being held in the palm of Zhuan's hand like a little chick. Such a contrast was something that he was unable to accept. Master Mufeng has been defeated? When Zhuan held Master Mufeng and stood quietly in the air, the entire excellent spirit island fell into silence. After a brief moment of silence, an uproar broke out. Mufeng, who was a heavenly arcane master, had been defeated by Zhuan, who was merely at the first level emperor realm. This was truly inconceivable. Mufeng, this trash. He's really useless. On the other side of the battlefield, Tiangu, who was fighting with Xiao He, had naturally seen this scene. His gaze instantly sank as he cursed in a low voice. The injuries in his body were too severe, and the strength that he could unleash was about the same as Xiao He's strength. Neither of them could do anything to the other. Moreover, as the battle continued, Tiangu's source energy was constantly dissipating through his injuries, causing him to become increasingly weak. His combat strength was slowly decreasing, and he knew that it wouldn't be long before his strength would continue to decrease. At that time, there was a possibility that he would be defeated by the great Nether Saint Dragon. Tiangu, don't struggle anymore. You're already an arrow at the end of its flight, Xiao He said in a deep voice. With a swipe of his right claw, Tiangu was immediately forced to take a few steps back. Great Nether Saint Dragon, even if I'm an arrow at the end of its flight, I'm not someone that you can take down right now. Die! Tiangu coldly snorted. Rolling black gas gushed out from his body, and his 12 arms continued to expand. They were like pillars that supported the heavens, and were extremely terrifying. He threw out a punch, forcing the great Nether Saint Dragon to retreat. Xiao He took a few steps back, and his expression was somewhat gloomy. Although Tiangu's source energy was constantly dissipating, his vitality was extremely tenacious. Even if his combat strength was insufficient, it wouldn't be easy to kill him. Looking at Tiangu, who was unmoving, Zhuowen's expression gradually turned ugly. Although Xiao He's aura was extremely powerful and terrifying, he was exhausting the yuan power in his body. After such a short period of time, half of his yuan power had been exhausted. Zhuowen, take out the War God catalog and completely seal this Tiangu. Chapter 1296. The slaughter of the war god. The Baifeng could naturally feel Zhuowen's yuan energy being depleted, and he quickly thought of the Abyss Saint Dragon. After all, the Abyss Saint Dragon was too powerful. Zhuowen would have to expend a lot of yuan energy to maintain such a powerful existence in battle. The Abyss Saint Dragon was only at the peak of the First Heaven Great Emperor realm. Even though he had a dragon soul, and had more yuan energy than ordinary cultivators, it still wasn't enough to sustain the Abyss Saint Dragon's endless expenditure. The slaughter of the war god? Teacher, are you planning to use the slaughter of the war god? But teacher, your divine will is still very weak. Can you sustain the slaughter of the war god? At this moment Zhuowen, who was standing not far away with Mufeng in his right hand, frowned in surprise. We can only use the slaughter of the war god. Otherwise, how long can you sustain the Abyss Saint Dragon? The Baifeng said solemnly. Zhuowen looked deeply at the Baifeng and sighed softly. With a wave of his sleeve, 16 stone tablets suddenly appeared in the sky. With Zhuowen as the center, they revolved around him. The 16 mysterious diagrams on the tablets glowed with a frightening light and a mysterious aura. The Baifeng held the immortal stone and stepped out, arriving above the 16 stone tablets. He slowly formed a seal with his hands. His movements were very slow but very clear. Zhuowen, I will now teach you how to use the slaughter of the war god. Watch carefully. All of a sudden, the Baifeng smiled at Zhuowen. Then his hands began to move faster. The hand seals went from simple to complex. Gradually they became more complex. Powerful hand seals surged out, and the 16 stone steels below began to stir. Zhuowen quietly watched the Baifeng's movements. A trace of sadness appeared in his eyes, but he didn't show it. Instead, he watched the Baifeng's movements very seriously. Battle the heavens, battle the earth, battle the desolation. Battle Emperor, battle Saint, battle Taigu. The Baifeng murmured in a low voice. The corners of his mouth curled up. Waves of battle intent swept out from the 16 slaughter of the war god, filling the entire sky. Then, the 16 stone tablets began to expand, from their original size of around 10 feet to 10,000 feet. Boom! Boom! Baifeng shouted loudly. He pressed down with his right hand, and the 16 stone tablets, which contained a soaring fighting spirit, fell from the sky with a loud rumble. Xiao He, who was originally fighting with the heavenly insect, had naturally received prior notice from Zhuowen. At this moment she decisively retreated. Before the heavenly insect could react, it was suppressed by the 16 huge stone tablets. Boom! The instant the 16 stone tablets came crashing down, countless mysterious symbols rushed out from the stone tablets, drawing a complicated diagram in the air. A supreme and soul-stirring pressure overflowed from the 16 stone tablets. What a terrifying pressure! Is this the power of the slaughter of the war god? Feeling the overwhelming pressure, Zhuowen's pupils shrank, and he could not help but mutter to himself in a low voice. Bastard Baifeng, you old bastard! How dare you use the slaughter of the war god? You are just a divine consciousness body. Do you want to die? The heavenly insect struggled wantonly under the encirclement of the 16 stone tablets. However, the 16 stone tablets were extremely vast and terrifying. No matter how hard the heavenly insect struggled, it could not break free from the confinement of the stone tablets. This made the heavenly insect both shocked and angry. I only know that you will not live, Baifeng said indifferently. He took a step forward and arrived above the 16 stone tablets. The celestial energy gushing out from the celestial stones was gathered under his right palm. Then he slammed it down. Instantly, a powerful and vast energy lit up from the 16 stone tablets. No! The slaughter of the war god produced an extremely terrifying destructive energy. The center of the 16 stone tablets was covered by a vast expanse of white energy. At a glance, it was impossible to see the end of it. Only the heavenly insect's shrill cries could be heard echoing in the air. Above the stone tablets, Baifeng was expressionless. He continuously channeled his celestial energy into the slaughter of the war god. As he channeled his celestial energy into the slaughter of the war god, the body formed from his divine consciousness constantly faded and dimmed. His presence grew weaker and weaker. Teacher, Zhuowen was shocked. He hurried to Baifeng's side, but just as he was about to approach him, he was stopped by Baifeng. Zhuowen, watch my actions carefully. The slaughter of the war god is your teacher's masterpiece. You need to learn it well, Baifeng said seriously. Zhuowen paused. He opened his mouth to say something, but in the end he fell silent. He nodded and silently watched Baifeng's actions. Baifeng's methods were very complicated. He used these complicated methods to control the energy and explosions in the slaughter of the war god, constantly destroying the heavenly insect's colossal body. Under the attacks of the slaughter of the war god, the heavenly insect cursed and howled. However, as time went on, the heavenly insect's voice naturally became weaker and weaker. It even became lethargic. Zhuowen also discovered that the heavenly insect's colossal figure was constantly being cut up. In the end, the heavenly insect directly turned to dust before Zhuowen's gaze. How powerful! The heavenly insect has been completely destroyed just like that? Looking at the empty war god catalog, Zhuowen's eyes also revealed a trace of shock. Due to the burial formation, Tiangu's strength had been greatly reduced, and it was extremely serious. However, the heavenly insect's vitality was extremely tenacious. Even Xiaohe, the slaughter of the war god, struggled to do anything to it. However, the slaughter of the war god had completely destroyed it with ease. It was evident just how terrifying the slaughter of the war god was. Zhuowen, did you see clearly the technique I used just now? The Baifeng slowly turned around. The profound intent of the slaughter of the war god revolved around him as he smiled at Zhuowen. Zhuowen's gaze froze. He could clearly sense the Baifeng's presence constantly weakening. However, the Baifeng smiled very gently as he looked at Zhuowen. Zhuowen's heart trembled when he saw the Baifeng's smile. His nose twitched slightly as he nodded heavily. Teacher, I saw it clearly. I saw it all clearly. Haha. Good. It's good that you saw it clearly. I know that with your talent, you will definitely surpass me in the future. The Baifeng fell silent for a while before smiling. You will also set foot in the Central Plains in the future. So, go take a look at the Bai clan. Crack. As soon as the Baifeng finished speaking, cracks began to appear on the surface of the immortal stone that held the former's body. The cracks continued to expand, but the Baifeng's smile became even more radiant and gratified. He quietly looked at Zhuowen, as if he wanted to engrave Zhuowen in his heart. Zhuowen, You're my first disciple, and at the same time my last disciple. It's my fortune to be able to meet you in my final days." As he spoke, the Baifeng glanced at the immortal stone that was constantly cracking. "My time may be up. Although I still have many things to say to you, I'm afraid time won't allow it." Crack! Finally, the immortal stone completely shattered into nothingness, and the Baifeng's figure began to fade and fade. "Goodbye, my disciple." The Baifeng's right hand gently rubbed Zhuowen's head. Then it completely dissipated into countless specks of light. Zhuowen stared at the specks of light that dissipated in midair. He reached out with his right hand and slowly clenched it. However, he realized that he could not grasp the specks of light in his hand. "Master." Kneeling on one knee in midair, Zhuowen muttered softly. His eyes were filled with sorrow. "Master." Yao Dai, who was in the demon god array, stepped forward and came to Zhuowen's side. She looked at the Baifeng that had already turned into countless specks of light. 2 streams of clear tears flowed from her beautiful eyes. Her voice was filled with sorrow. "Sigh. Zhuowen, even if the Baifeng does not use the War God catalog, he will not be able to survive for long with his remaining strand of divine consciousness. You don't have to be too sad." Xiao Hei's dragon body transformed into Xiao Hei's dog form. At this moment, he looked at Zhuowen, who was kneeling on one knee in midair, and consoled him with a heavy heart. However, Zhuowen did not seem to hear him. He continued to kneel in midair, as if he had been petrified. He did not move at all. Looking at Zhuowen's appearance, Xiao Hei knew that the dissipation of the Baifeng was a huge blow to him. However, he also knew that Zhuowen needed a quiet environment at this moment. Therefore, he very consciously waved his right paw and imprisoned Mu Feng. He threw him to the side, and did not let Mu Feng disturb Zhuowen. "Master." Wu Dai also came to a place not far behind Zhuowen. She wanted to approach Zhuowen, but was stopped by Xiao Hei. "Little girl, your master needs to be alone right now. Don't disturb him," Xiao Hei said in an indifferent tone. Hearing this, Wu Dai pouted. However, she could also feel the sorrowful aura coming from Zhuowen. In the end, under Xiao Hei's persuasion, she reluctantly looked at Zhuowen's back and stood where she was. Time passed day by day. Zhuowen continued to kneel in midair motionless. This went on for close to 15 days. Boom! On the morning of the 15th day, when a ray of sunlight shone down, a vast aura burst out from Zhuowen's body. The surrounding yuan qi started to boil, forming countless yuan qi cyclones that surrounded Zhuowen. Dang dang dang! Xiao Hei, Wu Dai, and Yao Dai, who were guarding Zhuowen, retreated under this aura. Their eyes were filled with shock. What a powerful aura! Zhuowen has broken through to the 2nd level of the Emperor realm. Yao Dai muttered in a low voice. She also discovered that Zhuowen, who had broken through to the 2nd level of the Great Emperor realm, was much stronger than ordinary Great Emperor realm cultivators. As for Xiao Hei and Wu Dai, after their initial shock, their faces were filled with joy. Under the influence of countless yuan qi cyclones, Zhuowen slowly stood up. His gaze was extremely calm, and an extraordinary aura was born spontaneously. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. After Zhuowen's breakthrough, Xiao Hei, Wu Dai, and Yao Dai immediately rushed to his side, looking at Zhuowen in surprise. Chapter 1297. 8th Azure Dragon Envoy Master. Are you alright? Wu Dai came to Zhuowen's side. Wrapping her jade-like hands around his shoulders, she asked in an extremely concerned manner. Xiao Hei and Yao Dai naturally stared at Zhuowen, their eyes brimming with concern. With a faint smile, Zhuowen replied, "I'm fine." As he spoke, his gaze looked towards the horizon as he spoke in an indifferent tone. "There will be a day when I head towards the Central Plains." Xiao Hei nodded her head. Naturally, she knew the main reason why Zhuowen had entered the Central Plains. In fact, it was mainly for the Baifeng's Bai family. Bang! All of a sudden, a muffled thunder-like sound rang out. In the next instant, extremely terrifying black qi erupted from Mu Feng's body. In the next instant, the black qi broke through the shackles on the surface of his body. Like a gust of wind, Mu Feng furiously fled into the distance. "Oh, it's that fellow Mu Feng. How did he break through this Dragon Lord's shackles?" Xiao Hei's furious voice rang out, attracting the attention of Zhuowen and the rest. Where do you think you're going? Zhuowen's gaze was eerily cold. Taking a step forward, he shot out explosively, appearing to shrink the ground to an inch. In an instant, he had caught up to the fleeing Mu Feng. 4 kills array. In the instant he caught up to Mu Feng, the 4 kills array smashed down once again. Frightening killing power surged out, completely sealing off Mu Feng's surroundings. Bang! Mu Feng did not say anything, as his right hand formed into a palm and fiercely rumbled out. Immediately, Zhuowen frowned as he discovered that Mu Feng's palm actually contained a frightening black aura. This black aura was truly very similar to the heavenly insects. Rumble! Mu Feng's palm shot out. In the next instant, the killing power of the 4 kills array collapsed. Without stopping, Mu Feng continued to flee. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. With a wave of his sleeve, he withdrew the 4 kills array. At this moment, the strength displayed by Mu Feng was much stronger than before. Furthermore, he had discovered that Mu Feng's method of attack was completely different. Instead of using mental energy, he used a black chi similar to the heavenly worm. It won't be that easy to escape. Zhuowen snorted coldly. He was much stronger now that he had broken through to the 2nd level of the Great Emperor realm. He waved his right hand, and the dragon seal in his palm started to emit a black energy. The roar of a dragon resonated in the air. Heavenly Dragon Lock Seal. Zhuowen coldly spat out these words. Clang! Countless chains shot out explosively amidst the loud and clear dragon roars. Densely packed, they completely sealed off the area within a 50-kilometer radius around Mu Feng. A powerful sealing force radiated out, causing the space within a 100-kilometer radius to collapse and collapse, as the entire space was sealed within. If one were to take a closer look, one would see that the chains were surrounded by countless black dragon silhouettes. These silhouettes danced and fluttered about in a rather spectacular and intense manner. Boom, boom, boom. Trapped within the space of the heavenly dragon lock seal, Mu Feng's advancing momentum came to a halt. Sending a ferocious punch smashing against the chains in front of him, intense clanging sounds rang out. In the next instant, he was sent flying back by the rebounding force, while his expression turned exceedingly dark. The might of the heavenly dragon lock seal was even more terrifying than the 4 kills array. Naturally, it wouldn't be that easy for Mu Feng to break through it. You're a heavenly worm? Zhuowen quietly hovered outside of the chains as he stared at Mu Feng, whose eyes had turned jet black. Narrowing his eyes, he spoke out in astonishment. Mu Feng stared coldly at Zhuowen, before replying in a deep voice. I'm Mu Feng, and also a heavenly worm. Zhuowen, I'm one of the 10 great azure dragon envoys of the Blue Dragon Hall. Do you dare to kill me? If you kill me, the Azure Dragon main hall won't let you off. What a joke. Looks like you've been possessed by a heavenly worm. Aren't you afraid that the heavenly worm will devour you? Furthermore, I possess a dragon soul, and am a descendant of the Ryuka. Even if I don't look for the Azure Dragon main hall, the Azure Dragon main hall will come and find trouble with me. Why should I care about the Azure Dragon main hall? Replied Zhuowen in an indifferent tone. Hearing those words, Mu Feng's face turned dark and gloomy. Looks like you really don't plan on letting me leave. You'll regret it. As he spoke, Mu Feng flipped his right hand. At some unknown point in time, a jade talisman had appeared in his palm. Spatial energy radiated from the jade talisman. Passing through the heavenly dragon lock seal, the spatial energy rushed straight towards the horizon. In the next instant, a crack appeared in the void, before an illusory figure slowly descended. This illusory figure appeared to be a middle-aged man in his 30s. His jawbone was high, and his face had a faint golden hue to it. His gaze was as sharp as a venomous snake's. His gaze first landed on Zhuowen, before shifting away and landing on Mu Feng. 10th Azure Dragon Envoy, why are you in such a state? Don't tell me this was done by this brat? This middle-aged man naturally frowned upon seeing Mu Feng's miserable appearance, as he spoke out in a somewhat displeased manner. The aura from Zhuowen's body was only at the 2nd level of the Heavenly Emperor realm. Therefore, he naturally did not believe that Zhuowen was the one who had caused Mu Feng to end up in such a state. 8th Azure Dragon Envoy, help me escape. This brat is not simple. He's a descendant of the Ryuka and possesses the Great Abyss Saint Dragon. One's strength cannot be judged by its appearance. At this moment, the pitch-black color in Mu Feng's eyes had already faded and had turned clear and bright as he spoke to the middle-aged man who had just appeared. Oh, he's actually a descendant of the Ryuka? Furthermore, he possesses the Great Abyss Saint Dragon? The 8th Azure Dragon Envoy's gaze landed on Zhuowen. The corners of his mouth curled up into a cruel smile as he continued. In other words, if we capture this brat and bring him back to the Azure Dragon main hall, wouldn't we be rewarded handsomely? Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. The aura from this middle-aged man in front of him was terrifying, even more so than Mu Feng's. Mu Feng was an arcane heavenly master, and his various techniques were actually comparable to a 7th-level heavenly emperor. However, this middle-aged man in front of him was much stronger than Mu Feng. It was very likely that he was an 8th-level heavenly emperor. Right now, although Zhuowen had broken through to the 2nd level of the heavenly emperor realm, it would be very difficult for him to fight against an 8th-level heavenly emperor. Release Feng Mu, and at the same time, bind your own arms and follow me back to the Azure Dragon main hall. I will let you off and not cripple you. The 8th Azure Dragon envoy grinned and said cruelly. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "What qualifications do you have to ask me to bind my own arms and follow you back to the Azure Dragon main hall? Let me ask you, who do you think you are? Do you think that just because you put on a high and mighty attitude, you are the heavenly emperor? In fact, in my opinion, your actions are really laughable and childish." The 8th Green Dragon envoy's expression was a little sluggish. His eyes immediately darkened as he said, "You are really bold. You actually dare to speak to me in such a manner. In that case, I can only cripple you before bringing you back to the Green Dragon headquarters." After saying that, the 8th Azure Dragon envoy took a step forward, and the might of an 8th-level heavenly emperor erupted. A terrifying yuan qi storm swept out from his body, and his clothes and hair fluttered wildly. He looked like a demon god that had descended to the mortal world. Tyrant Fist of the Heavens, the 8th Azure Dragon emissary threw out a punch. Terrifying origin energy condensed into a huge fist shadow that was a few hundred feet tall. It was like a huge mountain that came crashing down. The fist shadow was filled with terrifying pressure, as if the entire sky could be smashed down with a single punch. Zhuowen's eyes were extremely solemn. Facing an 8th-level heavenly emperor's attack, he had no choice but to use his full strength. Therefore, he directly took out the 4 slaughter formation and blocked in front of him. Rumble! The tyrant fist of the heavens came crashing down on the 4 slaughter formation, and an extremely loud explosion resounded. Zhuowen frowned slightly. The 4 slaughter formation was actually pushed back by such a powerful force, and so was he. "Break it!" The 8th Azure Dragon envoy roared, and punched out again and again. Every punch was wrapped in a heavenly fist aura, and it crushed down on Zhuowen. His face was slightly pale. Crack! Finally, under the 10th punch, the 4 slaughter formation was broken. Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood, and his eyes were extremely gloomy. "Haha, I've already said that you're no match for me. If you'd listened to me obediently and followed me back to the Azure Dragon headquarters, you wouldn't have suffered so much. But now it's already too late. I'll break every bone in your body and let you taste the feeling of living a life worse than death." The 8th Azure Dragon envoy's eyes were filled with savagery. He laughed and took a step forward. His imposing aura was like a rainbow as he punched towards Zhuowen, intending to destroy him completely. "Oh no, Zhuowen, be careful." When Xiaohei, Wu Dai and Yao Dai saw this scene, they could not help but exclaim. Yao Dai and Wu Dai immediately entered the core of the demon god formation and activated the huge demon god to help. However, it was too late. The 8th Azure Dragon envoy had already arrived in front of Zhuowen, and his fist was heavily aimed at Zhuowen's chest. Zhuowen quietly stared at the fist that was getting closer and closer. There was no fear in his eyes. When the 8th Azure Dragon envoy's fist was completely in front of him, Zhuowen flicked his finger and took out a long sword that was full of cracks. You took out such a broken long sword in front of my attack. You are indeed courting death. Looking at the Emperor Wu Tian's sword that was floating in front of Zhuowen, the 8th Azure Dragon envoy laughed and threw out a punch without a care. However, when his fist landed on the Emperor Wu Tian's sword, his face suddenly froze. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. This was because he found that the broken Emperor Wu Tian's sword suddenly burst out with a pressure that made even him tremble. Pucci! The Emperor Wu Tian's sword buzzed and directly slashed the 8th Azure Dragon envoy's fist. Wu Dai and Yao Dai were shocked to find that the 8th Azure Dragon envoy's tyrant fist of the firmament was directly broken. Even his right hand was directly turned into a cloud of blood mist. Ah! The 8th Azure Dragon envoy screamed and retreated dozens of steps. He held his broken right arm and stared at the Emperor Wu Tian's sword in front of Zhuowen. He exclaimed, "A saint weapon? You actually have a saint weapon?" Zhuowen did not say anything. He pointed his right hand and immediately, the Emperor Wu Tian's sword whistled and flew towards the 8th Azure Dragon envoy again. The latter naturally retreated in horror. However, the Emperor Wu Tian's sword was after all a profound saint weapon and contained a powerful saint aura. It was not something that an 8th-level martial emperor, like the 8th Azure Dragon envoy, could resist. No! After dodging more than 10 moves, Emperor Wu Tian's sword suddenly accelerated and stabbed into the neck of the 8th Azure Dragon emissary at a tricky angle. Then, there was a burst of bright blood. The 8th Azure Dragon emissary's head was directly cut off. Chapter 1298. Absorbing the 9 heavens' purple profound lightning swoosh. The instant the 8th Azure Dragon envoy's head was chopped off, a ray of light shot out from the 8th Azure Dragon envoy's body. It let out a sharp whistle as it flew into the distance. Yuanying. Zhuowen sneered. Under his will, the heavenless sword suddenly shot out. Sword chi swept out everywhere it passed, forming a violent hurricane. Swoosh. The heavenless sword was extremely fast. In an instant, it caught up with the 8th Azure Dragon envoy's Yuanying. Sword light flashed and pierced through the Yuanying. The 8th Azure Dragon envoy's Yuanying let out a miserable shriek. It was extremely dim and powerless. With the power of the heavenless sword, it was naturally able to directly destroy the 8th Azure Dragon envoy's Yuanying. However, Zhuowen could not bear to destroy it. After all, the 8th Azure Dragon envoy's position in the Blue Dragon Hall was not low. He definitely knew the structure and situation of the Azure Dragon main hall. With a step, Zhuowen arrived beside the 8th Azure Dragon envoy. With a stroke of his right hand, the 8th Azure Dragon envoy's Yuanying was held in his palm. The 8th Azure Dragon envoy trembled as he knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. "Sir, please let me go. I have no intention of going against you. It's all because of that bastard Mu Feng. He actually used the spatial jade talisman to summon me here. Please spare me." The 8th Azure Dragon envoy was extremely sensible. He actually put down his dignity as an 8th Heaven Emperor and knelt on the ground to beg Zhuowen for mercy. This caused Zhuowen to be rather surprised. Zhuowen completely ignored the 8th Azure Dragon envoy's begging. With a wave of his right hand, he directly kept the 8th Azure Dragon envoy into his spiritual ring. A pair of cold eyes landed on Mu Feng, who was trapped in the Heavenly Dragon sealing seal. He grinned and said, "It's your turn." Seeing the radiant smile on Zhuowen's face, Mu Feng's entire body trembled, while a feeling of dread rose up in his heart. His gaze was firmly fixed on the Emperor Wu Tian's sword, as he said in a trembling voice, "It's actually the Emperor Wu Tian's sword." Back then, the Emperor Wu Tian's sword had clearly been shattered by my lord. How can it still be used now? Zhuowen did not reply, but his heart ached. The Emperor's sword was indeed severely damaged. Xiao He had said before that this sword could only be used 2 more times. Now that the first time had been used, there was only 1 more time left. "You talk too much. Just die." Zhuowen gave a cold snort as he took a step forward, directly entering the Heavenly Dragon lock seal. The heavenless sword in his hand shot out, causing countless sword chi to sweep out. Like a shooting star, it streaked across the void, shooting straight towards Mu Feng, who was within the Heavenly Dragon lock seal. Damn it! Fear appeared in Mu Feng's eyes, and his eyes turned pitch black once again. Black chi rolled out from his body, and his aura instantly became much more powerful and terrifying. Mu Feng extended his right hand, as the rolling black chi condensed into 12 gigantic palms. Shooting out, they smashed against the Emperor Wu Tian sword. Bang! The Emperor Wu Tian sword was extremely terrifying. With a slash of it, the 12 palms condensed from black chi were completely shattered into nothingness. No. After slicing apart the 12 palms, the Emperor Wu Tian sword's aura was like a rainbow as it streaked across the void, continuing to shoot towards Mu Feng. As the terrifying sword chi radiated out, it caused Mu Feng's hair to flutter about. An aura of death rose within Mu Feng's heart, causing him to feel fear and trepidation. Block it! Although the might of the Emperor Wu Tian sword was terrifying, it was naturally impossible for Mu Feng to sit and wait for death. Pushing his hands out, he borrowed the strength of the heavenly insects to form a tough and durable black barrier in front of him. Crack! However, the black barrier was completely useless in the face of the Emperor Wu Tian sword. Upon contact, it instantly shattered apart, while the Emperor Wu Tian sword pierced right through Mu Feng's body. At the same time, the Emperor Wu Tian sword bent in the air, sending out 2 rays of sword light that cut off all 4 of Mu Feng's limbs. A miserable shriek rang out as Mu Feng screamed out hysterically. Due to the pain and suffering, his face had turned somewhat malevolent, while a sliver of despair gushed out from his eyes. Mu Feng, you've exhausted all of your schemes, and schemed against everyone that had entered the Emperor's tomb, causing the deaths of countless innocent cultivators. Furthermore, for the sake of obtaining the inheritance of the Emperor's tomb's master, you've actually colluded with the heavenly insects, such evil creatures. In the end, you've ended up in such a state. This should be considered as karma, right? Zhuowen moved in front of Mu Feng. With a wave of his right hand, he grabbed Mu Feng. His gaze was exceedingly calm, as he stared indifferently at Mu Feng. The latter's heart trembled as he said in a deep voice, "However, I'm still one step behind. I'm very regretful. Back then, when you were completing the river diagram, I had already captured you and forcefully seized the river diagram array from your body. If so, I wouldn't have ended up in such a state. From the moment you colluded with the heavenly insects, your fate has already been decided. I just want to ask you, do you know about the dangers and origins of the heavenly insects?" Zhuowen said with narrowed eyes. However, Mu Feng smiled and said, "Naturally I know about them. However, so what? As long as I can obtain great power, even if everyone else dies, what does that have to do with me? Zhuowen, you've killed the 8th Azure Dragon envoy. Now I'm going to die at your hands. You've killed 2 great Azure Dragon envoys from the Azure Dragon main hall. You won't be able to escape. You'll be hunted down by the Azure Dragon main hall. At that time, your fate will be even more miserable than mine." Mu Feng laughed heartily. In the next instant, his right hand suddenly pointed at the spot between his eyebrows. Instantly, his aura began to slowly disappear. In the end, his aura was completely destroyed. "You're destroying your own spiritual sea?" Looking at the completely lifeless Mu Feng, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. Pressing his right hand on the former's forehead, he discovered that the spiritual sea between Mu Feng's eyebrows had actually been completely destroyed. Very clearly, Mu Feng knew that he was already unable to escape from Zhuowen's grasp. Therefore, he decided to just destroy himself. After all, the spiritual sea was an extremely important thing for an arcana master. Once it was destroyed, it was equivalent to having one's soul scattered. There was no chance of survival. "You're really decisive." After taking a deep look at Mu Feng in his hand, Zhuowen released his right hand and tossed Mu Feng's corpse into the sea of bitterness. After causing a series of ripples, Mu Feng's corpse sank into the depths. "Zhuowen, this Mu Feng is the 10th Azure Dragon envoy of the Azure Dragon main hall. Furthermore, the 8th Azure Dragon envoy was also killed by you. I'm afraid that we won't be able to hide this matter from the Azure Dragon main hall for long. Brat, you better be careful." Xiao He came to Zhuowen's side, speaking in a somewhat solemn manner. Zhuowen nodded his head. The Blue Dragon Hall was known as the overlord of the Eastern lands. Therefore, its foundation was definitely extremely rich. An existence like that was truly something that Zhuowen could not afford to offend. However, Zhuowen was not afraid. The Blue Dragon Hall and Ryuka were mortal enemies. Once Zhuowen developed Ryuka, he would have to face the Blue Dragon Hall. In fact, he was even prepared to let Ryuka replace the Blue Dragon Hall and become the new overlord of the Eastern lands. I'm aware of this matter. Zhuowen nodded his head. Shortly after, his gaze landed on the Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning before him as he said, Xiao Hei, the Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning's rampage has yet to end. I wonder if my Lei Sanyi can absorb the power of the Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning? Lei Sanyi is a mystical pair of wings derived from the wind and lightning sacred symbol. It possesses unparalleled speed. The Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning is also a lightning energy. You can go in and give it a try. However, the Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning is extremely powerful. If you feel that you can't withstand it, it's best for you to retreat. Don't act recklessly, Xiao Hei warned with a solemn gaze, causing Zhuowen to vigorously nod his head. After which, he took a step forward, 3 pairs of lightning wings unfurling behind his back. Just like that, he entered the Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning that was still rampaging. Is that fellow crazy? He actually intends to enter the rampaging Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning. On the nearby islands, many cultivators naturally noticed Zhuowen's crazy actions. They had just recovered from the shock of Zhuowen killing the 8th Azure Dragon envoy in Mufeng. Now they were once again stunned by Zhuowen's shocking actions. Originally, the Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning's power was extremely terrifying. If Emperor Realm cultivators were struck by it, they would die. Now, coincidentally, the Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning's rampage was many times stronger than before. Most likely, even a high-level Emperor Realm cultivator would be doomed if they entered the depths of the clouds. Therefore, when Zhuowen flew towards the gathering place of the Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning, many cultivators were stunned. Rumble! When Zhuowen neared the periphery of the clouds, purple lightning as thick as a water bucket swept out from the clouds and directly struck down, blasting towards Zhuowen's head. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. Just as he was about to dodge, countless dragon, serpent, and serpent shadows rushed out from the 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back. The serpent, and dragon creatures intertwined together, forming an extremely terrifying thunderbolt. It violently collided with the purple thunderbolt. Immediately, purple and blue plasma spilled out in all directions, as if there were countless threads of electricity surging. What surprised Zhuowen was that the lightning formed by the snake, flood dragon, and dragon was actually slowly nibbling away at the energy of the Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning. After about 10 breaths, the purple lightning that swept out from the clouds was directly swallowed by Lei Sanyi. Zhuowen's sharp senses discovered that the blue lightning on the surface of Lei Sanyi's body was actually faintly tinged with a trace of purple. It looked rather gorgeous and colorful, and even Lei Sanyi's aura had become much more vast. As expected of the wings derived from the wind and lightning saint symbol, it actually has the ability to devour lightning. Feeling this characteristic of Lei Sanyi, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with surprise. With a wild roar, he directly rushed into the depths of the clouds. In the rolling black clouds, thousands of purple lightning gathered, transforming into a huge purple lightning dragon that swept straight towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen was not afraid. He unfolded the lightning wings to the extreme. Suddenly, countless lightning snakes, flood dragons, and lightning dragons appeared around his body, blocking the terrifying purple lightning dragon. If one looked carefully, the purple lightning dragon began to be slowly nibbled away by the lightning snakes, flood dragons, and lightning dragons, merging into a part of their bodies. This scene immediately stunned and dumbfounded countless Bitter Island cultivators. In front of the Berserk Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning, Zhuowen was like a fish in water. Not only was he not devoured by the Berserk Nine Heavens' purple profound lightning, the purple lightning was devoured by him. To be more precise, it was devoured by the 3 pairs of lightning wings on his body. Awesome! Chapter 1299. Lightning Wings Mutation 3 Days and 3 Nights. The 9 Heavens Purple Profound Lightning continued for 3 days and 3 nights. Zhuowen had also sat within the 9 Heavens Purple Profound Lightning for 3 days and 3 nights. In the air, the lightning wings on Zhuowen's back, which were originally 30 feet wide, had now grown to 100 feet wide. Furthermore, if one were to look closely, the 3 pairs of lightning wings, which were originally separated, were faintly showing signs of fusing together. Countless roars resounded around the lightning wings. This was because there were countless dragon, serpent, and serpent silhouettes lingering around the lightning wings. The roars were accompanied by the rumbling of thunder, which was extremely ear-piercing. Boom! Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. Purple lightning flashed in his eyes. Then, the 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back suddenly exploded with purple lightning. Then, the 3 pairs of lightning wings merged into a huge pair of lightning wings. With just a flap of the lightning wings, purple lightning descended around him. It was the 9 Heavens Purple Profound Lightning. I never imagined that after absorbing the 9 Heavens Purple Profound Lightning, the lightning serpent wings, lightning flood dragon wings and lightning dragon wings would actually fuse into a 10-foot lightning wing. His gaze fell on the extremely huge lightning wings on his back. A smile appeared on the corner of Zhuowen's mouth. He could feel that after absorbing the 9 Heavens Purple Profound Lightning, the lightning wings were much stronger than before. Furthermore, their speed with a thought, Zhuowen flapped the purple lightning wings. Countless purple lightning dissipated. Soon after, Zhuowen disappeared from the spot as though he had teleported. The instant he appeared, he was already 1,000 miles away. So fast! This was not only what Zhuowen thought. In the distance, Xiaohe, Yao Dai and Wu Dai were also thinking. Even the cultivators near Misery Sea looked as though they had seen a ghost when they saw the figure that had teleported 1,000 miles away. They did not even see Zhuowen's figure clearly. The latter was already 1,000 miles away. That speed was simply too terrifying. Rumble! 1,000 miles away, the purple lightning flapped once again. Soon after, Zhuowen appeared before Xiaohe, Yao Dai and Wu Dai. Looks like after absorbing the 9 Heavens Purple Profound Bomb, your Lei Sanyi has undergone quite a transformation. Xiaohe looked at Zhuowen with a hint of surprise in her eyes. But more than that, she was gratified. Yao Dai and Wu Dai, on the other hand, were overjoyed. Haha, I think I can smell the nascent soul aura of a high-level great emperor. Suddenly, a rather savage voice shot out from Zhuowen's body. Shortly after, a damaged jade cauldron shot out from Zhuowen's forehead. A fox-like creature emerged from the jade cauldron. It was the Fuxi cauldron's Cheng Huang. Your nose is really sharper than a dog's. Xiaohe curled his lips as he looked at Cheng Huang, and snorted in displeasure. Yes, little Long Long, my nose is indeed more sensitive than yours. Cheng Huang did not seem to hear the sarcasm in Xiaohe's words. Instead it retorted. Xiaohe was like a kitten whose tail had been stepped on. She jumped up and glared at Cheng Huang with hostility. Woof woof, this dragon lord will bite you to death. Thus, a little black dog and a yellow fox began to bite each other. Between the dog's barking and the fox's barking, there were also sounds of cursing that rang out in the air. Zhuowen held his forehead as he watched Xiaohe and Cheng Huang bite each other. These two fellows seemed to be destined to fight each other. Zhuowen felt extremely helpless. By the side, Wu Dai and Yao Dai exchanged glances with each other, as a strange expression appeared in their eyes. They did not expect that Zhuowen was hiding these two strange fellows. Although Xiaohe and Cheng Huang's actions were strange, their auras were extraordinary. Therefore, Yao Dai and Wu Dai naturally did not interfere. Enough is enough, you two. With a dark expression, Zhuowen took a step forward and threw the Fuxi cauldron between Xiaohe and Cheng Huang. Sure enough, when they saw the Fuxi cauldron, the two fellows who were still fighting decisively stopped. After all, the Fuxi cauldron had a special meaning to them. They did not dare do anything to it. Little guy, you have the nascent soul of a high-level great emperor, don't you? Hee. Cheng Huang tidied its slightly messy fur and turned to look at Zhuowen, as if nothing had happened. It rubbed its furry paws together like a miser and chuckled. Zhuowen was a little surprised by Cheng Huang's behavior, but Xiao He was the first to speak. This guy probably needs the nascent soul of a high-level great emperor to repair the Fuxi cauldron. What do you know? High-level great emperors are useless for repairing the Fuxi cauldron. Cheng Huang glared fiercely at Xiao He. Xiao He didn't understand. Then what do you want to do with it? High-level great emperors' nascent souls are the main ingredient of a superior immortal pill, the immortal essence pill. The immortal essence pill is extremely precious to great emperors. It can forcibly raise a cultivator below high-level great emperor by a minor level without any side effects, Cheng Huang explained calmly. It can forcibly raise a great emperor's cultivation by a whole level? Is the immortal essence pill that useful? Zhuowen asked in surprise. Xiao He retorted coldly, forget it. You haven't even repaired the Fuxi cauldron yet. Are you trying to make an immortal essence pill? Are you kidding me? Cough cough. Repairing the Fuxi cauldron isn't easy. Just wait and see. It won't be long before I'll be able to repair it. When that time comes, the Fuxi cauldron will be able to refine pills. Cheng Huang coughed dryly. However, before you refine the pill, Zhuowen, you should leave the advanced great emperor's nascent soul with me for safekeeping. Zhuowen was quite eager for the immortal essence pill, but he shook his head. That nascent soul is the 8th Azure Dragon envoy of the Blue Dragon Hall. I have some things to ask that guy, so I can't give them to you yet. Is that so? That's fine. After you ask him, just toss that guy's nascent soul into the Fuxi cauldron. With that, Cheng Huang re-entered the Fuxi cauldron and disappeared into Zhuowen's sea of consciousness. Let's leave this place for now and head for Excellent Spirit Island, Zhuowen said to Yao Dai and Wu Dai. All right. Yao Dai and Wu Dai had no objections. After returning to Excellent Spirit Island, Zhuowen discovered that all the cultivators on the island were looking at him with reverence. It was as if he was a majestic statue. However, Zhuowen didn't mind too much. He knew that everyone's attitude towards him was mainly due to the strength he had displayed. In this world where the strong were respected, strength would naturally earn the respect of others. Master, should we enter the 9 Netherworld realm? I really want to go in and see what it's like, Wu Dai, who was standing beside Zhuowen, suddenly said. Zhuowen glanced at Yao Dai, who was standing behind Wu Dai. Yao Dai smiled bitterly and nodded. Clearly, she also agreed to let Wu Dai follow Zhuowen. All right, I'll bring you with me when the time comes. However, I still need to make a trip to the Azure Xian Empire. You don't need to come with me. When I return, I'll bring you to the 9 Netherworld realm, Zhuowen said softly to Wu Dai. Master, why are you going to the Azure Xian Empire again? I remember you went there last time, right? Wu Dai asked curiously. Zhuowen chuckled. I still have some matters to attend to. Wait for me here. Zhuowen naturally couldn't tell her about the Saint Rune laws. After all, it involved too much. Without waiting for Wu Dai's reply, a pair of purple lightning wings spread out behind Zhuowen's back. Following that, ear-piercing thunder rumbled and Zhuowen disappeared from the spot. Master, really? Watching Zhuowen disappear before her eyes, Wu Dai curled her lips and stomped her foot. She felt somewhat helpless in her heart. In the sea of misery where the emperor's tomb was located, a corpse floated to the surface of an inconspicuous reef. The corpse, which was originally drifting with the current, immediately stopped. If one were to look carefully, the corpse's 4 limbs were completely broken. Its entire body was swollen and looked quite miserable. CICICI. When the corpse slammed into the reef, its originally tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. It was a pair of incomparably dark eyes, as if there was an endless abyss in them. Strands of black qi started to linger around the corpse's broken limbs. Under the effect of the black qi, the severed limbs of the corpse started to slowly regrow. When the limbs were completely regrown, the person took a step into the embittered sea and leapt to the top of the reef. Zhuowen, you've ruined this king's plan to break the seal. You deserve to die. The eyes of this figure flickered as he cursed in an extremely vicious manner. Soon after, he once again spoke in a low voice. Fortunately, this seat had left a strand of my will within Mu Feng's body. Although that Zhuowen had forced Mu Feng to self-destruct his sea of consciousness, It just so happened to give this strand of my will the opportunity to successfully seize Mu Feng's body. However, this king's will and strength are truly too weak. Looks like I need to sneak into the Azure Dragon main hall and wait for an opportunity to slowly recover. I'll settle the score with that Zhuowen sooner or later. The figure slowly raised his head, revealing an exceedingly grim expression. If Zhuowen was here, he would definitely be able to recognize this figure as Mu Feng, who had committed suicide. Naturally, the real Mu Feng had already died. At this moment, the strand of the heavenly worm's will that existed in this body. Furthermore, it was an extremely weak strand of his will. Descendant of the Ryuka, and killing the 8th Azure Dragon envoy. If I return to the Azure Dragon main hall with the identity of Mu Feng, and inform the Blue Dragon Hall about these two things, I'm afraid that it would be a great merit. Next, I just need to hibernate in the Blue Dragon Hall and recover. Mu Feng's low and deep voice slowly rang out. In the next moment he stomped his foot on the reef. The powerful force behind his stomp caused the reef to shatter apart, while he shot out explosively like an arrow that had been released from a bow. Zhuowen naturally did not know that Mu Feng had been taken over by the heavenly worm's will, and had come back to life. If he knew about it, he might have completely destroyed Mu Feng's corpse back then. Chapter 1300. Black Dragon Empire. After entering the Imperial City, Zhuowen realized that the Imperial City was much more prosperous than before. There were even more cultivators here. Moreover, the city walls of the Imperial City were much thicker and taller than before. They must have been specially repaired after the previous battle. Walking on the huge street, Zhuowen was surprised to find that the name of the Qingxian Empire had been changed to the Black Dragon Empire from the conversations of the people around him. The new emperor of the Black Dragon Empire was called Emperor Bai. Zhuowen knew that Emperor Bai was probably Bai Mei. Looks like Bai Mei is interested. Hearing that the Qingxian Empire had been renamed to the Black Dragon Empire, Zhuowen's lips curled into a smile. Moreover, from the discussions of the cultivators around him, it seemed that they had a good impression of Emperor Bai and respected him. It seemed that after a few months, Bai Mei had managed to keep the imperial capital in good order. Walking slowly towards the imperial city's dungeon, Zhuowen was not in a hurry to summon Bai Mei. Instead, he strolled around the imperial city, quietly looking at the people and things around him. He sighed in his heart. The imperial city was a place that left a deep impression on him. This place carried many of his memories. Previously, because of the battle with Emperor Qing, he did not have the time to take a good look at this place. Now that he had settled everything, he naturally wanted to take a good look at the imperial city. However, the more he looked, the more he felt that things had changed. The imperial city had changed too quickly. Get out of the way, all of you, get out of the way. Don't block my view. Otherwise, all of you will be caught and beheaded. Suddenly, a delicate cry was heard from the front of the street. Soon after, Zhuowen was surprised to discover that the originally densely packed crowd in front of him had consciously parted. Moreover, he could sense that the faces of those who had parted were filled with intense fear. It's actually the daughter of the country guarding Marquis, Miss Qin Xuanmei. The country guarding Marquis is a big shot recently promoted by Emperor Bai. His position in the imperial city is extremely high, only below Emperor Bai. He is a very popular person now. We can't afford to offend the daughter of such a person. Otherwise, we might really be caught and beheaded. That would be too unjust. Let's get out of the way. Don't block the way. Suddenly, there was a burst of whispers in the surroundings. Zhuowen also looked in front of him in surprise. He had never heard of this country guarding Marquis before. However, from the discussions around him, he knew that the country guarding Marquis should have been promoted recently. He should be Bai Mei's confidant. In front of them, a woman in a light red dress was riding a huge griffin and rushing towards them. This woman had a graceful figure. Her waist was like a water snake, and there was a belt with red stripes. If one looked closely, the belt was actually a small snake that was constantly spitting out its tongue. At this moment, the woman was skillfully driving the griffin as she chased after a black shadow in front of her. The black shadow was extremely fast. Even though the woman in red was riding the griffin, she was unable to catch up to it in a short while. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and saw that the black shadow that was escaping in front of him was actually a python that was about a meter long. This python was quite strange. It actually had 3 heads. 3-headed flaming spirit snake? No, it's a little different from the 3-headed flaming spirit snake. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He realized that this python was similar to the 3-headed flaming spirit snake that he had encountered in the dragon vein. However, the 3-headed flaming spirit snake was fiery red all over. Although this python also had 3 heads, its surface was dark gold. Moreover, the aura of this 3-headed flaming spirit snake was far more powerful than the 3-headed flaming spirit snake. However, Zhuowen realized that this 3-headed flaming spirit snake was not large in size. It was probably still in its infancy and was not very powerful. It was probably around the level of an ultimate emperor. Although the woman in red's aura was weaker than this 3-headed flaming spirit snake and was only around the level of an ultimate emperor, there were 2 figures following behind her. These 2 figures' auras were much more powerful. They were actually ultimate emperors. It was because of the 2 figures behind the woman that the 3-headed flaming spirit snake was escaping in such a sorry state. Let's see where you can run to. The distance between the griffin and the 3-headed flaming spirit snake was getting closer and closer. Finally, the woman swung her right hand and pulled out the small snake at her waist. She used it as a whip and flung it out. The small snake was not ordinary. The moment the woman flung it out, the snake's body immediately swelled to several feet long. Extremely blazing flames appeared on its skin. In an instant, a sea of fire appeared and blocked the 3-headed flaming spirit snake's path. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The little snake hissed a few times as its path was blocked. However, its reaction speed was extremely fast. With a swing of its tail, it changed its direction and rushed to the side. The direction it was rushing towards was exactly where Zhuowen was. Zhuowen raised his eyebrows. He did not expect the 3-headed flaming spirit snake to choose him. Could it be that he had concealed his aura and was like an ordinary cultivator, so it chose him to be a pushover? Thinking of this, Zhuowen was a little amused. The 3-headed flaming spirit snake was only an ultimate 8-wheel emperor. This kind of strength was as insignificant as an ant in front of him. However, his gaze quickly turned cold. The griffin girl also reacted. With a wave of her hand, the flaming python in her hand was flung over. Terrifying flames burst out and directly enveloped Zhuowen and the 3-headed flaming spirit snake. The cultivators who were originally standing not far from Zhuowen scattered like birds and beasts. Their faces were filled with lingering fear. This guardian guarding marquis daughter, Qin Xuanmei, was indeed unruly. She did not even treat the cultivators as human beings. Although the 3-headed flaming spirit snake was heading towards Zhuowen, it was not to the extent of attacking him as well. That is a flaming python. The young man's aura was weak just now. Under such an attack, I'm afraid he will be finished. The surrounding cultivators, who had escaped a calamity, rejoiced as they turned their gazes back to the flames. Their eyes were filled with pity. They knew that the young man had suffered an unexpected calamity and was most likely going to meet a tragic end. Swoosh! A black shadow swept out from the flames and attracted everyone's attention. Immediately, they saw the 3-headed flaming spirit snake fleeing in panic. However, the 3-headed flaming spirit snake's aura was very weak at this moment. It was obvious that it had suffered serious injuries from the attack just now. Let's see where you can run to. Capture it for me. The girl raised her right hand and kept the flaming python in her hand. Then, she ordered the 2 figures behind her. Yes, miss. The 2 of them were middle-aged men in their 30s and 40s. They wore heavy black armor. The 2 of them took a step forward and blocked in front of the 3-headed flaming spirit snake. The 2 of them blasted out a palm at the same time. Yuan power spurted out and set off violent energy ripples. Boom! Under such an attack, the 3-headed flaming spirit snake wailed and fell from the sky to the ground. It struggled a few times on the ground, but could not get up for a while. Miss! One of them unceremoniously pinched the 3-headed flaming spirit snake in his palm. Yuan power spurted out and formed a transparent prison, causing the three-headed flaming spirit snake to be unable to move. After which, he handed it over to the girl. The corner of the girl's mouth revealed a pleased smile. She extended her jade-like hand and pinched the three-headed flaming spirit snake. She said, "Little fellow, you still want to escape? You should obediently become my pet." Hiss hiss hiss. The three-headed flaming spirit snake's body continued to twist and turn. The golden stripes on its body emitted a glow, and its eyes were filled with fury. "Hee hee, it is useless even if you are unwilling. You are destined to become my pet." As she spoke, the girl pinched the three-headed flaming spirit snake and said to the two middle-aged men beside her, "Since we have captured this little fellow, let's return home." "Leave? Are you sure you want to leave just like that?" Suddenly, an indifferent voice resounded, causing the body of the girl, who had originally turned around, to stiffen. Soon after, the red-clothed girl slowly turned around. When she saw the young man, who was quietly standing at the same spot, her beautiful eyes revealed a tinge of surprise. "You are actually not dead." The surrounding people also turned their attention to the young man. The expression in their eyes was no different from the girl's. The young man's aura was not strong, but he was actually unharmed under the girl's attack. This caused the surrounding people to take a few more glances at him. "Oh, you have hidden your cultivation. You are actually unharmed under the attack of my flaming spirit snake?" This time, the red-clothed girl finally sized up the young man in front of her. The surprise in her beautiful eyes quickly turned into a mocking expression. Zhuowen stared indifferently at the red-clothed girl. He pointed at her and said, "Now kneel down and apologize to me. Otherwise you will not have the chance later." When these words came out, the entire surrounding fell into silence. Everyone looked at Zhuowen with a strange gaze. They secretly muttered in their hearts, "Did water enter his brain?" He actually dared to ask the country-guarding Marquis daughter to kneel down and apologize to her face. Even Qin Xuanmei revealed a startled expression. Soon after, her beautiful eyes slightly narrowed. Suddenly, she laughed softly and said, "You want me to kneel down and apologize?" Zhuowen did not waste any more words. His right hand stretched out in the air. Instantly, the red-clothed girl, who was originally sitting on the griffin, felt as if there was a huge mountain pressing down on her body. The griffin she was sitting on exploded into a cloud of blood mist, and Qin Xuanmei fell to the ground in the cloud of blood mist. Plop! Qin Xuanmei groaned in pain and knelt on the ground. Countless drops of blood dripped down from midair, dyeing her entire body blood red. She looked like a delicate and beautiful rose. Presumptuous! The two middle-aged men, who were originally beside Qin Xuanmei, had a slight change in expression. They shouted loudly and violently rushed towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen slightly tilted his head. His cold demon-like pupils stared indifferently at the two middle-aged men. Then he merely stretched out a palm. Yuan power spurted out and transformed into a huge invisible palm. Plop! Under the invisible palm, the two middle-aged men did not even have the chance to groan before they exploded into two clouds of blood mist. They were deader than dead. Hiss! The moment the two middle-aged men died, the surrounding crowd fell into silence. They stared unwaveringly at the young man, who was bathed in the rain of blood. Their eyes were filled with fear. Chapter 1301. Emperor Baizhua had never been the one to stir up trouble. However, once something happened to provoke him, he would definitely resolve it with lightning speed. He would definitely not drag things out. Ah! Blood rained down as Qin Xuanmei knelt on the ground. She finally reacted and screamed. Her voice was extremely loud and piercing. The three-headed snake, which was originally imprisoned beside Qin Xuanmei, flashed its eyes. As the two middle-aged men were killed, the imprisonment on its body naturally collapsed. Hiss! The three-headed snake roared and bit directly at Qin Xuanmei's white neck. Qin Xuanmei, who was originally screaming, naturally did not notice the three-headed snake and was bitten directly. In an instant, Qin Xuanmei's screams weakened. Her face turned green and black. She fell to the ground and began to convulse. "This snake is poisonous," Seeing Qin Xuanmei in such a state, many people around stepped back and stared at the three-headed snake with fear. "Father, save me." Qin Xuanmei convulsed as she took out a jade-colored token and crushed it with trembling hands. At this moment, in the depths of the imperial city, in the vast throne room, a figure in a white robe sat quietly on a futon in the hall. His eyes were narrowed, and the aura in his body was like a storm on the sea. It was extremely powerful and terrifying. In front of this figure, a middle-aged man with a tall and straight posture and sharp eyes stood quietly on one side of the hall. He gazed respectfully at the figure on the futon. Xuanmei? Not good. Suddenly, the middle-aged man's face changed drastically. The aura in his body suddenly surged, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. "Qin Zhao, what's the matter?" The figure sitting cross-legged on the futon slowly opened his eyes. He turned his head and stared at the middle-aged man. This figure exuded a strong emperor's aura. Strangely, this person's eyebrows were white and long, falling on his cheeks. "Emperor Bai, my daughter used the jade pendant just now. I gave it to her. She will only use it when she is in a life-and-death situation, so." The middle-aged man quickly bowed and said. Emperor Bai was astonished and said, "Who in the imperial capital doesn't know your daughter? Someone actually dares to harm your daughter?" "I don't know. Now that my daughter's life is at stake, would your majesty, White Emperor?" Qin Zhao said anxiously. "Let's go, I'll go with you. I want to see who exactly dares to cause trouble in the imperial capital." Emperor Bai stood up and walked out of the throne room slowly. Qin Zhao was overjoyed and quickly followed him. He had not expected Emperor Bai to show up personally. However, he knew that Emperor Bai was doing this for his sake. That was why he had accompanied him to take a look. At the same time, it was also to build his reputation. After all, it had only been a few months since the White Emperor had promoted him to his current position. Although his reputation in the imperial capital was widespread enough, there were still some people who were unconvinced. If the White Emperor appeared in the imperial capital with him this time, the other voices of opposition would probably gradually lessen. Swoosh swoosh. Emperor Bai and Qin Zhao both had extraordinary cultivation. They took a few steps in the air and arrived at the street where Qin Xuanmei was. When Qin Zhao saw Qin Xuanmei, whose neck was bitten by the three-headed snake, and whose cheeks were green and black, his face suddenly changed. "Evil beast!" Qin Zhao only felt his blood boil. He took a step forward and came to Qin Xuanmei's side. The three-headed snake naturally saw Qin Zhao and immediately fled. It could feel the powerful aura on Qin Zhao's body. "Wanna run? Die!" Qin Zhao shouted angrily. Terrifying yuan power gushed out. Suddenly, countless yuan power arrows appeared on the surface of his body and flew in the direction of the three-headed snake. The three-headed snake screamed and twisted its tail to dodge the arrows. However, there were too many yuan power arrows. The three-headed snake's tail was directly pierced by a yuan power arrow. Blood spurted out, and its body froze in midair. Then countless yuan power arrows pierced through it. Puff! The three-headed snake screamed and fell to the ground from midair. Its snake body kept twitching, and its aura gradually weakened. After killing the three-headed snake, Qin Zhao immediately came to Qin Xuanmei's side and spat out his yuan power to prevent the poison from spreading in Qin Xuanmei's body. "Xuanmei, this three-headed snake is only at the ultimate 8-wheel emperor realm. You have Qin Lu and Qin Yin protecting you. How did it bite you?" Qin Zhao asked while expelling the poison for Qin Xuanmei. At the same time, he was extremely puzzled. Qin Lu and Qin Yin were both at the ultimate 9-wheel emperor realm. How could Qin Xuanmei be bitten by the three-headed snake? Moreover, he also found that Qin Lu and Qin Yin seemed to have disappeared. There was a pool of blood on the ground, which gave him a bad feeling. "Father, it was that guy who killed Qin Lu and Qin Yin. It was because of him that I was bitten by the three-headed snake." Qin Xuanmei pointed her jade-like finger at Zhuan, who was not far away. Her eyes were filled with intense hatred. Her expression was agitated, and her chest was heaving up and down like a bellows. Qin Zhao slowly tilted his head. His cold gaze fell on Zhuan, who was not far away. He said in a deep voice, "You killed Qin Yin and Qin Lu. Do you know who I am?" At this moment, The surrounding people also fell silent. Their gazes fell on Qin Zhao and Emperor Bai, and they all revealed looks of whispering. It's actually the country guarding Marquis Qin Zhao. Even Emperor Bai accompanied him here. He really has a lot of face. Of course. Otherwise, how could the country guarding Marquis rise so quickly? Of course. This is also related to the country guarding Marquis's strength and talent. He has already reached the peak of the heavenly venerable realm at the mere age of 37. I'm afraid that he has a high chance of entering the Emperor realm. That's why Emperor Bai thinks so highly of him. Zhuowen crossed his arms. He stared at Qin Zhao with a strange gaze and said, "The surrounding people all said that you are the country guarding Marquis. So what?" Zhuowen's reaction greatly exceeded Qin Zhao's expectations. He originally thought that after hearing his name, Zhuowen would be afraid, fearful, and even regretful. However, he did not see any of these emotions on Zhuowen's face. The only thing that remained was that eternal calmness. This reaction instantly enraged Qin Zhao. He coldly shouted, "Now, you have two choices. First, cripple your own cultivation, kneel on the ground, and crawl over to apologize to Xuanmei. Second, I will cripple you and throw you into the imperial city's dungeon, never to see the light of day again." "Then what if I choose neither of the two choices?" Zhuowen suddenly replied indifferently. When these words came out, it naturally caused quite a commotion. Everyone's gazes became increasingly strange. This youth was a little too calm. Facing the country guarding Marquis, who was extremely popular in the Black Dragon Empire, he actually did not seem to care. It was truly strange. "Then I will take it that you have chosen the second choice by default." A cruel smile appeared on Qin Zhao's face. Yuan power burst out from his body. Soon after, he took a step forward and appeared in front of Zhuowen, as if he had teleported. He stretched out his right hand, and surging Yuan power gushed out. It formed a huge Yuan power mountain and smashed down on Zhuowen's head. However, Zhuowen just stood there quietly. He did not move, not even lifting his hand. Looking at Zhuowen's appearance, the smile on Qin Zhao's face became even wider. He almost laughed out loud. However, his smile quickly froze. This was because a familiar figure suddenly blocked in front of him. Then, this figure quietly stretched out a hand and gently squeezed. Qin Zhao's attack immediately collapsed. Then a vast emperor's aura came crushing down. Qin Zhao's forward momentum suddenly stopped. Then, his cheeks flushed red and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He flew backwards and heavily smashed into the ground a dozen meters away. "Your Majesty Emperor Bai Yu." Qin Zhao barely propped himself up. He stared blankly at the figure that appeared in front of him. This person was none other than Emperor Bai, who had come with him. He was also the supreme leader of the Black Dragon Empire. His heart was filled with doubts. Why did Emperor Bai suddenly attack him? Was it because of the young man behind him? Many people around were also confused. From Qin Zhao attacking the mysterious young man to Emperor Bai suddenly intercepting Qin Zhao, everything had happened too quickly. However, some warriors with keen senses had already noticed that the mysterious young man was not ordinary. Emperor Bai's action was obviously to protect the young man. So, who was this young man? Emperor Bai glanced indifferently at the puzzled Qin Zhao before turning around. Under everyone's gaze, he knelt on one knee in front of Zhuowen and respectfully said, "Bai Mei greets master." At this moment, the entire street was silent. In that silence, only Bai Mei's voice echoed. Although his voice was not loud, in everyone's ears, it was so loud and clear that it was boundless. This scene was unbelievable in everyone's eyes. Emperor Bai, the ruler of the Black Dragon Empire, knelt on one knee in front of a young man in front of everyone and called him master. Everyone subconsciously dug their ears, thinking that what they heard was an illusion. Qin Zhao's hands, which were propping himself up, trembled violently. He fell to the ground again involuntarily. He stared at Emperor Bai, who was kneeling on the ground, with his mouth wide open. Emperor Bai's master? Could it be? Qin Zhao muttered softly. He seemed to have thought of something. His eyes suddenly revealed a tinge of regret and fear. He suddenly thought of a person in his mind. A person who had once subverted the entire Qing Xian Empire. Qin Xuanmei, who was standing not far away, was shocked and confused. The hatred in her eyes had long been replaced by shock and confusion. The strongest person in the empire, Emperor Bai, was kneeling on one knee in front of the young man. This scene was too shocking. Zhuowen stared at Emperor Bai, who looked a little nervous. He nodded lightly and said, "Get up." "Yes." Emperor Bai got up slowly and said guiltily, "Master, I did not know that you would suddenly come to visit. I did not know that Qin Xuanmei dared to offend you. Please forgive me. If Master feels uncomfortable, I will immediately kill Qin Xuanmei and Qin Zhao to relieve Master's hatred." Chapter 1302. The Flying Serpent Has No Feet. Plop. Suddenly, Qin Zhao and Qin Xuanmei kneeled on the ground and said in a trembling voice, "Your Majesty Bai Di, please calm down. Please forgive us. Qin Zhao and my daughter did not recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive us." Thump, thump, thump. At the same time, Qin Zhao kept kowtowing. His forehead hit the ground and made a dull sound. The people around him were shocked. Qin Zhao, the country guarding Marquis of the Black Dragon Empire, knelt on the ground and kowtowed. This scene shocked many warriors in the imperial capital. Bai Mei was unmoved. His gaze fell on Zhuowen. He bowed and said respectfully, "Master, how do you want to punish them?" At this moment, Bai Mei was a little nervous. He was the one who promoted the country guarding Marquis. This time, he came out to build momentum for the country guarding Marquis and stabilize his position. However, he did not expect that Qin Xuanmei, the daughter of the country guarding Marquis, would offend his master Zhuowen. Bai Mei's only thought was to cut ties with the country guarding Marquis. Bai Mei also realized that he could not see through Zhuowen's aura. He remembered that a few months ago, before Zhuowen went to the Misery Sea, he was only at the peak of the celestial venerable rank. However, he could not see through him now. This could only mean that Zhuowen's cultivation had also broken through to the Emperor realm. Thinking of this, Bai Mei was shocked. He knew that when Zhuowen was at the peak of the celestial venerable rank, he had killed someone in the Emperor realm. Now that he had advanced to the Emperor realm, his strength must be even more terrifying. "Do as you see fit," Zhuowen said indifferently. Bai Mei nodded and turned around. He clenched his right hand, and his origin energy turned into a palm. He pointed at Qin Zhao and Qin Xuanmei's lower abdomens. With the sound of a balloon bursting, the two of them spat out a mouthful of blood. "Today, I will destroy your cultivation. From now on, Qin Zhao, your title as the country guarding Marquis will be taken away. You will be a commoner, and will not be able to enter the imperial capital." After doing this, the white-browed man turned around and stood respectfully behind Zhuowen with a flattering smile on his face. How ruthless! When the surrounding crowd saw Bai Mei's action, they could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. To a cultivator, crippling his dantian was more cruel than killing him. In this world where martial arts reigned supreme, if one did not have cultivation and strength, they would eventually be reduced to the lowest rung of society and be bullied and humiliated. As for the Marquis Qin Zhao and Qin Xuanmei, they had offended many people. Now that they had offended someone they should not have offended, their cultivation had been destroyed by Emperor Bai. If the two of them were to fall into the hands of their enemies, they would suffer a fate worse than death. Qin Zhao and Qin Xuanmei's faces were as pale as snow. Their eyes were filled with despair. They knew they were done for. "White Brow, take me to the imperial city's prison." Zhuowen did not pay attention to Qin Zhao and Qin Xuanmei. To him, they were not on the same level. He did not need to pay too much attention to them. "Yes, master." Bai Mei cupped his hands together and took the lead. Heading towards the underground prison of the imperial city, Zhuowen quietly followed behind him. Rumble! The moment Bai Mei and Zhuowen took off, the throne room in the depths of the imperial city suddenly shook, and the huge throne room suddenly collapsed. What happened? Why did the throne room suddenly collapse? All the cultivators in the imperial capital raised their heads and looked at the collapsed throne room. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. Bai Mei and Zhuowen, who were heading towards the underground prison of the imperial city, also stopped and looked in the direction of the throne room in confusion. Rumble! The instant the throne room collapsed, a gigantic black figure that was thousands of feet tall suddenly soared into the sky. That gigantic body stretched across the horizon like a bridge that led to the endless void, as if there was no end to it. The huge figure that appeared above the throne room had a huge snake body that was close to 1,000 feet long. The green scales on its body shone with a terrifying cold light. What was even more strange was that on the back of the huge snake, there was a pair of huge flaming wings that were hundreds of feet long. They looked dazzling. Flying serpent has no feet to fly. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he stared at the huge snake body that appeared in the sky and muttered, "Who is it? Killing my bloodline again. The bloodline that I painstakingly nurtured has been killed again. Damn it." The flying serpent roared at the sky. The rolling sound waves were extremely powerful and resounded in everyone's ears. Many warriors covered their ears with their hands, their faces contorted in pain. There were even some weaker martial artists whose faces flushed red and spat out blood under this roar. They actually fainted on the spot. What a terrifying creature. It seems to be a flying serpent with an ancient bloodline. The warriors in the imperial city stared at the roaring flying serpent with fear in their eyes. The flying serpent's roar was already so powerful. If a battle really broke out, it would be earth-shattering. Swoosh! The flying serpent spread its wings and came to the three-headed snake that was lying in a pool of blood. Its huge eyes were filled with terrifying anger. The three-headed snake that was covered with golden patterns was completely dead. Its bloodline had been killed again. The flying serpent was almost mad with anger. Damn humans. All of you must die. Die, die, die. The flying serpent roared and swung its huge tail. Suddenly, with it as the epicenter, a terrifying gust of wind swept up in 100 feet radius. The gust of wind was as sharp as a blade. The warriors in the 100 feet radius did not even have time to react before they were shredded into pieces by the gust of wind. All the buildings in the area collapsed into ruins. Run! The other warriors in the 100 feet radius screamed and retreated. At the same time, their eyes fell on Bai Mei. Emperor Bai, please do something. The flying serpent is too terrifying. I'm afraid its strength has reached the Emperor realm. Emperor Bai was the strongest person in the Black Dragon Empire. Naturally, they would ask for his help immediately. Bai Mei's eyes became extremely solemn. He could feel the terrifying aura from the flying serpent. This aura even made him shudder. At this moment, the soaring serpent had also noticed Bai Mei and Zhuowen, who was following behind. Immediately, it was stunned, its large eyes staring fixedly at Zhuowen as it said in a venomous voice, "It's you again, it's you again. You must have killed my bloodline again. I want you to pay with your blood." Swoosh! With a furious roar, the soaring serpent charged towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen looked at the flying serpent with a strange gaze. He was speechless. The flying serpent was really unlucky. The bloodline that it had painstakingly nurtured was killed one after another. Moreover, both times the bloodline was killed, it was directly or indirectly related to Zhuowen. The first time was when Zhuowen killed the three-headed flaming spiritual serpent king. Now the three-headed snake was also killed because of him. Thinking about it, it seemed that Zhuowen and the flying serpent were destined to clash. "How dare you, evil creature!" Bai Mei cried out loudly and took a step forward. Immediately, a several thousand feet large Bai Mei giant eagle appeared under his feet. With a swoosh sound, both man and eagle shot forward and headed towards the flying serpent. Emperor Bai has used his armor spirit. He should be able to stop the flying serpent. Looking at Bai Mei standing on the huge white-browed eagle, many people in the imperial capital calmed down. Emperor Bai's strength had been deeply ingrained in the hearts of the people in the past few months. Therefore, whenever Emperor Bai fought, many warriors in the imperial capital would subconsciously think that Emperor Bai would win. A mere first-level Emperor realm trash dares to stop me? The flying serpent snorted and flapped its wings. A violent wind swept out and hit Bai Mei. Instantly, the huge white-browed eagle under his feet was annihilated. Pfft! Bai Mei spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. He landed heavily on the ground. The imperial capital fell silent in an instant. Emperor Bai had been defeated too quickly. He had been sent flying by the flying serpent as soon as they came into contact. Wasn't the difference a little too big? After a moment of silence, the countless martial artists in the imperial capital were filled with fear. If even the White Emperor was no match for the soaring serpent, who else could? Emperor Bai just called that young man as his master. Perhaps that young man can stop the flying serpent. You're right. Emperor Bai is an Emperor realm warrior. For Emperor Bai to call him master, this young man is at least a middle-level emperor. He should have no problem dealing with the flying serpent. The warriors in the imperial capital stared at Zhuowen, who was not far away. Their eyes were filled with hope, as if they were grasping at a life-saving straw. Despicable human, you've improved quite quickly. You're already a second-level emperor. However, with your strength, it's still not enough to stop me. The flying serpent's loud voice suddenly rang out. The warriors in the imperial capital, who had been filled with hope, suddenly became gloomy. He's only a second-level emperor. I'm afraid he's no match for the flying serpent. Looks like the imperial capital is doomed. Not long after the flying serpent's words, many warriors in the imperial capital began to retreat and leave the imperial capital. The soaring serpent's aura was terrifying. It was probably comparable to a mid-level great emperor. Without a mid-level great emperor, it would be difficult to suppress the soaring serpent, let alone the mysterious young man, who was only a second-level great emperor. Not enough. Zhuowen slowly raised his head, the corner of his mouth curling into a cold smile. He took a step forward and condensed his immortal qi. A tiger head great spear appeared in his hand. It was the high-grade emperor weapon he had obtained from the emperor's tomb, the tiger head clear golden spear. Boom! Zhuowen's right hand tightened, and his arm abruptly stopped in front of him. The tiger head clear golden spear continued to spin as earth-shaking tiger roars resounded throughout the world. Humph! You're courting death. The flying serpent snorted coldly. With a swing of its tail, it swept out with countless astral winds, as if it was crushing the entire space. Boom! The flying serpent's tail collided with the tiger head clear golden spear. Both of them exploded with terrifying energy. Slash! Soon after, countless cultivators in the imperial capital were shocked to discover that the soaring serpent's enormous tail was cut off like tofu by the tiger head clear gold spear. It fell from the sky, and countless drops of blood drifted down from the sky. Chapter 1303. Saint Rune Law. The flying serpent screamed as it flapped its wings and retreated a few dozen steps. It stared at Zhuowen in shock. The flying serpent had an ancient bloodline, and its body was tough and strong. Even a mid-level emperor would find it difficult to break its body. However, the young man in front of it was only a second-level emperor, but he had cut off its tail in one move. It was terrifying. The flying serpent's attention quickly fell on the tiger head clear golden spear in Zhuowen's hand. It asked in a low voice, "Is that a high-grade emperor weapon?" Zhuowen's lips curled into a smile. He did not say a word. He stepped forward and immortal energy surged out from his body, infusing it into the tiger head clear golden spear. A milky white light shot into the sky, and a terrifying aura came crashing down, causing the flying serpent to tremble. "Human, just you wait. I won't let you go so easily." The flying serpent roared furiously. It flapped its wings and disappeared from the sky above the imperial capital like a gust of wind. In the blink of an eye, it appeared a few hundred meters away. "You can't escape." The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled up in an arc. Purple lightning spread out from his back, forming a 10-meter-long pair of purple lightning wings. Soon after, there was a rumbling sound as Zhuowen disappeared from where he stood. When he reappeared, he was already 1,000 meters away, blocking the soaring serpent's path. "Die!" Zhuowen did not hold back. He twisted his right palm, and the tiger head clear golden spear spun at high speed. Tiger roars rang out, causing the flying serpent to fall into a momentary daze. Puffed! When the flying serpent recovered from its daze, the tiger head clear golden spear had already arrived. The tip of the spear shone with a sharp light as it touched the flying serpent's jaw. Light bloomed, and the tiger-head clear golden spear pierced through the flying serpent's huge body. The moment the tiger-head clear golden spear pierced through the flying serpent's body, it began to expand until it was 1,000 feet long. The sharp tip of the spear pierced through the flying serpent's tail and stopped at the flying serpent's jaw. "Let me go." Mengshi stared fixedly at Zhuowen, his pierced lower jaw trembling slightly as he emitted a rather muffled sound. Zhuowen did not say anything. His right palm suddenly spun, and surging immortal force swept out. The tiger-head clear gold spear emitted a resounding buzzing sound, and immediately, the soaring serpent's eyes revealed a pained expression. "Puchi!" An earth-shattering wail rang out. The soaring serpent's colossal body collapsed inch by inch under the tiger-head clear golden spear. Countless droplets of blood fell from the sky, enveloping the entire imperial capital. In the instant that the soaring serpent exploded into a bloody mist, Zhuowen happened to catch a glimpse of a bright red bead floating within the bloody mist. With a wave of his right hand, Zhuowen drew the bead into his palm and examined it carefully. The surface of the bead was covered with bright blood patterns. They were densely packed and looked like snake scales. It was a picturesque sight. "This is the soaring serpent's Niden. This soaring serpent possesses an ancient bloodline. The demonic force within this Niden is probably extremely dense. This is good stuff." Xiao Hei's voice rang out, causing Zhuowen to nod his head. At the same time, he also thought of Wu Dai. After all, Wu Dai was the same as the soaring serpent. She also possessed an ancient bloodline. Perhaps this Niden would be of great help to Wu Dai. At the same time, Zhuowen was also sighing in his heart. When he had first entered the dragon vein, the soaring serpent had given him an extremely strong deterrent force. At that time, he could only look up to the soaring serpent and flee in panic. But now he only needed one move to kill the soaring serpent. Zhuowen felt that the world was unpredictable. At this moment, the entire imperial capital was raining blood, but the cultivators in the imperial capital did not seem to hear it. Their eyes were firmly fixed on the tall figure in the sky. Compared to the colossal soaring serpent, this figure seemed so small and insignificant. However, the power contained within this tiny figure shocked everyone. This was because the powerful and terrifying soaring serpent had been so easily dealt with by this person. So strong. All the cultivators could not help but murmur softly. Their feet seemed to be rooted to the ground as they stood on the spot, their lips trembling. At this moment, Bai Mei also stood up from the ground. He had personally witnessed the figure who had killed the soaring serpent with a single spear strike. His eyes were filled with respect and admiration. "Bai Mei, let's go." Bai Mei, who was still in a daze, suddenly heard this voice and could not help but come back to his senses. He nodded his head and hurriedly followed Zhuowen in front of him. However, deep in his eyes, there was a deep emotion. No matter what, the soaring serpent had the strength of a mid-level martial emperor. However, in the hands of Zhuowen, it had been killed in an instant. This strength was indeed terrifying. After Zhuowen and Bai Mei left, the blood rain stopped. In the imperial capital, the cultivators who were still in a daze came back to their senses. Immediately there was an uproar. "So terrifying. Who exactly is that young man?" His Majesty Emperor Bai called him master. The terrifying soaring serpent was killed in an instant. This is too powerful. I remember now. Do you know who was the one who destroyed the Qing Xian Empire? It's Zhuowen. Back then, Emperor Qing banished Zhuowen. Do you mean that young man is Zhuowen? After Zhuowen's name was mentioned, the surrounding cultivators all fell silent. Zhuowen's name could be said to be resounding in the Qing Xian Empire back then. Almost everyone knew him. Now that they heard this name again, everyone felt as if a lifetime had passed. They did not expect that the unknown young man from back then had become so powerful and terrifying. The same thought appeared in everyone's mind. This young man was too demonic. The imperial capital's dungeon was still enveloped in a huge sea of fire. Within the sea of fire, there were countless mysterious sealing forces. Standing above the sea of fire, Zhuowen quietly looked down and said softly, "Father, I'm back." Boom! A huge double-headed dragon came from the abyss below the sea of fire. On top of the double-headed dragon, a handsome middle-aged man was sitting cross-legged. At this moment, he raised his head slightly and stared at Zhuowen above. A bright light flashed in his eyes. "You've broken through?" Zhuo Xiaotian chuckled. "I've broken through," Zhuowen replied with a smile. Zhuo Xiaotian laughed and said, "Well done. Previously, you said that your dragon soul is extremely powerful, and that you need to be in the Emperor realm to be able to materialize your dragon soul. Now that you've broken through, let me take a look." Zhuowen nodded and pointed at his forehead with his right hand. Suddenly, a dragon's roar surged out from his body. Then, a huge black dragon appeared above the sea of fire. The pair of dark golden dragon eyes looked down at Zhuowen below the sea of fire coldly and emotionlessly. Roar! The double-headed nether dragon below Zhuo Xiaoyan's feet let out a low roar and started to become restless. The dragon's body kept shaking as it looked at the huge black dragon in the sky with fear. So huge! Bai Mei took a few steps back with fear in his eyes. The Great Abyss Saint Dragon's aura was very terrifying. Ordinary Emperor Realm martial artists would feel a sense of oppression and fear. "What dragon soul is this?" Zhuo Xiaoyan's expression froze as he looked at Xiao He with a hint of doubt in his eyes. He could feel the terrifying aura coming from Xiao He. He dared to say that this black dragon was definitely an existence that surpassed the 7th grade. It might even be comparable to the 9th grade dragon soul of Ryuka. However, no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out what the black dragon's name was. "Its name is the Great Abyss Saint Dragon," Zhuowen said softly. "The Great Abyss Saint Dragon?" Zhuo Xiaotian murmured in a low voice. Then he stared at Zhuowen and said emotionally, "Zhuowen, the dragon soul in your body is very powerful. It's much more powerful than your father's. In the future, you might really be able to lead Ryuka back to glory." "Father, take this." Zhuowen stretched out his right hand and took out the wooden token he obtained from the emperor's tomb. There was a Saint Rune Law engraved on the wooden token. Because Zhuowen's cultivation level wasn't high enough, he couldn't comprehend the Saint Rune Law. It just so happened that Zhuo Xiaotian needed it. Zhuo Xiaotian spat out his right palm and blasted a palm-sized hole in the light barrier with all his strength. He then took the wooden token from the hole. At this moment, Zhuo Xiaoyan's cultivation level had reached the 9th grade Emperor realm. Although he couldn't break the imprisonment array, he could still blast a palm-sized hole in the light barrier with all his strength. However, the hole was quickly repaired by the imprisonment array and returned to its original state. If Zhuo Xiaotian could become an invincible Emperor Realm Master, he could blast a huge hole in the light barrier. At that time, it wouldn't be difficult for him to escape with the help of the hole. After taking the wooden token, Zhuo Xiaoyan's gaze fell on the strange runes on the surface of the wooden token. His eyes suddenly burst out with light. "Saint Rune Law? Zhuowen, where did you get the Saint Rune Law?" Zhuo Xiaotian asked excitedly. Zhuowen smiled and briefly explained the emperor's tomb. Only then did Zhuo Xiaotian understand the origin of the wooden token. "Father, I don't know anything about the Saint Rune Law. May I know what the Saint Rune Law in this wooden token means?" Zhuowen asked curiously. Zhuo Xiaotian carefully examined the runes on the wooden token and said indifferently, "Although I haven't fully comprehended the Saint Rune Law, I can see that the Saint Rune Law in this wooden token should be the wind law of the elements. This kind of law is considered a relatively common law. It has a certain degree of attack power, and also has powerful speed. Wind law. Are there different types of laws?" Zhuowen was stunned and immediately asked. It was his first time coming into contact with the Saint Rune Law, so he was extremely curious about it. Of course there are different types. The Saint Rune Law is a mysterious power comprehended by a saint from the laws of heaven and earth. There are various elements in the laws of heaven and earth, such as wind, lightning, the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and so on. In addition to some common laws, there are also some rare but extremely powerful laws, such as time, space, life, death, and so on. The world contains all things, so the laws of nature are also varied and varied. Zhuowen nodded, and his eyes revealed a look of understanding. He continued, "Then what kind of law did Father comprehend before?" You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.